with a gun. Shot at the sun with a gun. Shot at his wily one only friend. In the gallows or the ghettos, oh, in the town or the meadow, in the billows, even over the sun, every end of the time is another begun. You understand, mechanical hands are the ruler of everything, ruler of everything. I'm the ruler of everything in the end. Oh, right, I need to put together my little playlist. Hold on. Don't worry, I got it all. Son of a horse, I completely forgot. Let me get out my media player real quick. Don't worry, we're just gonna... Either way, hello everybody. Good afternoon. Sorry I'm a little late. I'll be honest, I kind of got distracted. I was thinking about what kind of dessert I'm gonna make tomorrow, because we're making Black Crusade characters. So I just need to... Actually, I should probably see if anybody... No, I don't think we have anything yet for... What? What? Why do you scream? You have food. Yeah, I know, I know. But let's see here. Aren't you just the cutest cat in the house? I know. What are you doing? Come here. You wanna come up? Oh? You just wanna run around and scream? Hang on. I just don't mind me. I need to tool what? Hi, do you wanna come up? There you are. Oh, I know. I hope you guys had a fun time yesterday with the Slay the Spire. I know I did. What was I doing? I guess I just need to drag in the things to the playlist. Don't worry about it. I also need to probably save this, you know. But you know, I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm the brightest uh uh sharpest knife in the crayon box. Yeah, that's what the kids say, right? Sounds correct. Okay, we've got those. Uh Probably don't want to do the Ave Maria because that one is I think that one's probably gonna get, you know, bopped. Maybe. I gotta tell you, actually, you know what? I should really see. Hold on. You give me just a second, but I need to check something. Uh, Astral Chain PC emulator. Because I'll be perfectly honest, is that if I can. Because I think that, yeah, Astral Chain is pretty darn good. But my Switch, I have it. I don't know where it is, mind you, but yeah, got a very fond place in my heart. But I'm also a sucker for Atlas titles. Atlas titles. I mean, I am, but it's platinum. Platinum, baby. Never loses its luster. Apparently does lose its director, though. At least that's what I heard. But anyway. Yeah, I was also thinking, so I still need to figure out what exactly it is that I want to make for dessert. Come here. What are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you doing that? What are you doing crying? You're a crime cat, eh? Crime. Prime! Gosh diddly darn it. Whatever. It's fine. It's okay. Hi! Hi, 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 hi. Come here. Come here, don't stand in front of the screen, please. I gotta read. Can't read very well on the second monitor on account of it's a little small. Because, you know, it's not like a full screen thing, which means that it might actually not be the best for mobile. But, you know, I mean, I'd wager reading streams aren't exactly the best for it anyway. Now, let me also save this playlist as a file. And do I have anything there for the VLC media? No? Okay. I just hit my microphone stand, I'm sorry. Stream. BGM. I did get all these off of Nova Syndrome, so, you know, I mean, they're all, you know, they're all pretty cool. Yeah, it looks alright to me. And then let's get that on repeat, and let's get that on shuffle. So hopefully it repeats and keeps shuffling, but you know what, that's fine. But anyway, yeah, I'm still trying to work out what kind of dessert I want to make. I'm thinking... I still don't actually know. So what the heck are we making? Sandwiches? I think we're making sandwiches. Or maybe it was more ribs. No, I think it's sandwiches. Hang on, let me, you know what, give me just a second. What are we having for dinner tomorrow? Actually, let's go with what's for dinner. What's for dinner again? I have completely forgotten. See, that works. Works well enough for me, at least. I don't know, I feel like Slay the Spire was actually pretty fun last night. Turns out it was also one of my best in terms of analytics, because I had like 2 viewers the whole time. Which is great. That's like double my usual. But yeah, I think it's I think we're well on the way I've accidentally opened up 2 copies of Don Quixote. Anyway. But yeah, we're here. Don't worry, I've had some rice. I might actually, hold on, give me just a moment. I'm gonna have some more of these dried cranberries, which again are like ridiculously high in sugar. Sorry for the little bit of Velcro ASMR that was... and like the wrinkling of the bag, but listen, Boley needs his snacks. I need snacks. If I don't have snacks, I'm gonna like burst into flames. After all, I am a living creature just like anything else. And I require sustenance. Yeah, then you might be saying, but actually, aren't you just like a big fruiting body? And then, but technically the majority of the organism is in the mycelial colony that's usually either inside of your substrate of choice or deep within the earth. And to that I say, yeah, but I'm also a 3-foot tall talking mushroom that wears an apron and is mediocre at worst at video games. Speaking of video games, I'm also thinking of trying my hand at because there's a new title from Akira Yamaoka. You know what? Whatever, that's fine. Called Splitterhead. Wow, would you look at that? It did the whole thing. Anyway, sometimes I'm fascinated by my own captions, but I'm very excited for that. Very. I would say very excited. It's been out for almost like 2 weeks, or maybe exactly 2 weeks, and I haven't heard of it until like 2 days ago when I was looking through my Steam recommendeds because, you know, I'm a fake and a fraud. But anyway. I might give that one a shot, because I mean it's like, hey, might as well. Because you know, I'd rather toss out $50 for a fresh new title than $70 for an admittedly, as I have been told, pretty darn good a remake. Yeah, that's the word. I could maybe also go and play the Dead Space remake again, because you know it's been a hot minute, and I do like that game a lot. I do like that game quite a fair bit. So maybe I just go for like a foam finger run, because you know I've got like 3 different impossible saves I could jump off of, including, you guessed it, hold on, I misplaced my train of thought. Sorry. I'm gonna have another bit of the snack though. What are you doing? Don't look at me like that. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Hmm. Hang on, let me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Anyway, sorry, I was just looking at the fruit company, because I'm like, it's like a lot of sugar. Like almost 80% of its weight is in sugar. Despite the fact that it says cranberries are the first. I mean, there's certainly mostly cranberries, but you know, it's like it's a lot of sugar, that's what I'm saying. Okay, granted, it's 33 grams of carbohydrates and then 28 grams of sugar, all of which 26 have been added. I don't know where I'm going with this. I should probably get right back to the reading, but you know what? I feel like a little pre-stream jawing session is quite important. You know, get my flaps all warmed up. Granted, though, I don't really think that I have much of like a morning voice. You know, like one of those where you're like, because you know some people got like that kind of gravelly tone to it. I don't really know. I don't think I've experienced anything quite like that. Or at least, if I did, I don't think I have it anymore. But that's neither here nor there, and I'm going to... Might also need to, like... What's the word? Figure out what's causing my chair to creak so much. But anyhow. Hi, what are you doing? Right, desserts. Because part of me was thinking like lokum, or Turkish delight, if you're not familiar with the name. But you know, it takes like 2 days to set, and I don't have any gelatin on hand. Granted, from what I have heard, it does keep quite well. So maybe, pardon me. So maybe I could go for some Turkish delight. You know what? Actually, hold on. Give me just a second. I'm gonna go take a quick gander here. Because at least we got, you know, the background tunes and we're flowing. We're having a great time. I like these music. You can find like great stuff off of Elvis Syndrome, man. Yeah, off of Elvis. Yeah, that's where you could whatever. I swear, I don't know, man. Let me you know what, actually, let me do I have any I don't think I have any of my ingredients. There's none of my cookbooks up here on here. Hold on, actually, I know where I can find one. Give me just a minute. I'll be right back. Go
get some snacks. Perhaps a carbonated soda.
it's me, I'm back. I guess who's got 2 thumbs and just found his Final Fantasy XIV cookbook. It was on top of the cork remover. You know, like for wine bottles. And I was like, I don't drink a lot of wine. Or at least I don't drink a lot of like corked wine. But I do have some chartreuse, and I'm like, I don't like wine, but I do have a bunch of liqueur. Says the man. But let me, you know what? Let me just take a look here, because I'm trying to figure out. Actually, hold on. We could probably swing Crimson Cider. Let's see. Okay, maybe not the Crimson Cider, but it could be a fun time. Hold on. Espresso Campana. I gotta tell you though, the pork cockerney that was in this book, ooh, to live for. Because I don't really like saying to die for, you know, because it feels like it's a little like, what's the word? Like, like a little silly, you know? Like, oh, these ladyfingers are positively to die for. And I'm like, wow, that's, I mean, geez, lady, come on, Mac. They're not like strudel, perhaps. No, maybe not a strudel. Actually, maybe cookies or coffee biscuits. I feel like coffee biscuits could be all right. Let me just keep taking a look here. Rest time of 45 minutes. Disgusting. Roland berry cheesecake. Tempting. Perhaps sesame cookies. Which needs almond flour, which I do have. All-purpose flour, salt, a cup of butter, some powdered sugar, and 2 tablespoons of honey, of which I have a fair amount of that. How big do these things need to be? Gently press down on the ball. Place baking sheet in the refrigerator for 1 hour. Repeat with remaining dough. Sorry, we're also... Don't worry, I gotta figure this out. And I figured if anybody wants to breeze in and lend their strength, I would be more than... Until about half the seeds are ground. Interesting. Plus an extra tablespoon of them. You okay? Alright. Anyway. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the sesame cookies. That could be an interesting idea. I could probably go for cookies. Probably not the cheesecake, actually. Hold on, give me just a second. Anyway. Let me see here. I mean, maybe the coffee biscuit? Because I do also have espresso, and also allegedly baking powder. No beet sugar, though. Not entirely sure where the heck one is supposed to get beet sugar specifically. There's also papanazzi, which I do quite enjoy, but I don't think I got any lemon juice. I'm thinking maybe just the cookies. Sesame cookie. Small bowl, combine flour, 1 tablespoon of black sesame and salt, butter and powdered sugar. When do you add in the black sesame seeds to be specific? How the heck does it say that? I think I'm positively crazy. I don't actually see where it says to add the Give me just another minute. I might actually just have to flick to... Anyway, yeah, I'm back. Sorry. Let me see here. Because yeah, I totally don't see it. At least for the sesame cookies. Hang on, let me just read this one up. Preheat the oven to 325 degrees in a food processor using a mortar and pestle. Grind the 1/3 cup black sesame seeds until about half of the seeds are ground. In a small bowl, combine the all-purpose flour, almond flour, the 1 tablespoon black sesame seeds, and the salt. In a large bowl, combine the powdered sugar and butter. Add the honey and mix well until well combined. Add the flour mixture and mix well. Line 2 baking sheets with parchment paper, then dust the parchment paper with flour. Do not use non-stick cooking spray as it will cause the cookies to spread too much. Scoop up a tablespoon of the dough and use your hands to roll it into a ball. Place the ball on one of the prepared baking sheets, then gently press down on the ball and make a disc about 2.5 inches wide. Repeat with the remaining dough. Place the baking sheet in the refrigerator for 1 hour. It doesn't say where they add the rest of the sesame seeds. You know, I assume you probably put them in the flour itself, but yeah, or maybe then you put. I don't really know though. I don't know. It's quite a mystery. Although I shouldn't be racking my brain about that. Also, as an aside, it's racking with a W. I'm 80% sure. Hang on, let me actually see here. What are you doing? Well, let's actually just rack. Rack is a verb compared to rack. To utterly ruin. Interesting. Maybe one of those cases of convergent evolution. But anyhow. Alright, you know what? We should probably get back to Don Quixote before I get distracted again. Come here. Alright, whatever. Just another quick sip of water. So I think we'll be shooting for like chapter 18, I suppose, today. And if we get there in a reasonable time, I might pivot to go and play something. I don't know yet. Chapter 9, wherein is related what will be seen there. 'Twas at the very midnight hour, more or less, when Don Quixote and Sancho quitted the wood and entered El Toboso. The town was in deep silence, for all the inhabitants were asleep, and stretched on the broad of their backs, as the saying is. The night was darkish, though Sancho would have been glad had it been quite dark, so as to find in the darkness an excuse for his blundering. All over the place nothing was to be heard except the barking of dogs, which deafened the ears of Don Quixote and troubled the heart of Sancho. Now and then an ass brayed, pigs grunted, cats mewed, and the various noises they made seemed louder in the silence of the night, all which the enamored knight took to be of evil omen. Nevertheless, he said to Sancho, "Sancho, my son, lead on to the palace of Dulcinea. It may be that we shall find her awake." "Body of the sun, what palace am I to lead to?" said Sancho, "when what I saw her highness in was only a very little house." "Most likely she had then withdrawn into some small apartment of her palace," said Don Quixote, "to amuse herself with damsels, as great ladies and princesses are accustomed to do." "Señor," said Sancho, "if your worship will have it in me, will have it in spite of me that the house of my lady Dulcinea is a palace. In this an hour, think you, to find the door open? And will it be right for us to go knocking till they hear us and open the door, making a disturbance and confusion all through the household? Are we going, do you fancy, to the house of our wenches, like gallants who come and knock and go in at any hour, however late it may be? But let us first Let us first of all find out the palace for certain, replied Don Quixote. And then I will tell thee, Sancho, what we had best do. But look, Sancho, for either I see badly, or that dark mass that one sees from here should be Dulcinea's palace. Then let your worship lead the way, said Sancho. Perhaps it may be so. Though I see it with my eyes and touch it with my hands, I believe it as much as I believe it is daylight. Though I see it with my eyes and touch it with my hands, I'll believe it as much as I believe it is daylight now. Don Quixote took the lead, and having gone a matter of 200 paces, he came upon the mass that produced the shade, and found it was a great tower, and then he perceived that the building in question was no palace, but the chief church of the town, and said he, "It's the church we have lit upon, Sancho." "I see," said Sancho. "So I see," said Sancho. "And God grant we may not light upon our graves. It is no good sign to find oneself wandering in a graveyard at this time of night, and that after my telling your worship, if I don't mistake, that the house of this lady will be in an alley without an outlet." "Oh, the curse of God on thee for a blockhead," said Don Quixote. "Where hast thou ever heard of castles and royal palaces being built in alleys without an outlet?" "Señor," replied Sancho, "every country has a way of its own. Perhaps here in El Toboso it is the way to build palaces and grand buildings in alleys. So I entreat your worship to let me search about among these streets or alleys before me, and perhaps in some corner or other I may stumble upon this palace, and I wish I saw the dogs eating it for leading us such a dance." "Speak respectfully of what belongs to my lady, Sancho," said Don Quixote. "Let us keep the feast in peace, and not throw the rope after the bucket." "I'll hold my tongue," said Sancho, "but how am I to take it patiently when your worship wants me, with only once seeing the house of our mistress, to know always and to find it in the middle of the night, when your worship can't find it, who must have seen it thousands of times?" "Thou wilt drive me to desperation, Sancho," said Don Quixote. "Look here, heretic, have I not told thee 1,000 times that I have never once in my life seen the peerless Dulcinea or crossed the threshold of her palace, and that I am enamored solely by hearsay and by the great reputation she bears for beauty and discretion?" "I hear it now," returned Sancho, "and I may tell you that if you have not seen her, no more have I." "That cannot be," said Don Quixote. "For, at any rate, thou saidst on bringing back the answer to the letter I sent by thee, that thou sawest her sifting wheat." "Oh, don't mind that, Señor," said Sancho. "I must tell you that my seeing her and the answer I brought you back were by hearsay too, for I can no more tell who the lady Dulcinea is than I can hit the sky." "Sancho, Sancho," said Don Quixote, "there are times for jests and times when jests are out of place. If I tell thee that I have neither seen nor spoken to the lady of my heart, it is no reason why thou shouldst say that thou hast not spoken to her or seen her, when the contrary is the case, as thou well knowest." While the two were engaged in this conversation, they perceived someone with a pair of mules approaching the spot where they stood, and from the noise the plough made as it dragged along the ground, they guessed him to be some labourer who had got up before daybreak to go to his work. And so it proved to be. He came along singing the ballad that says, "Ill did ye fare, ye men of France, in Roncesvalles chase." "May I die, Sancho," said Don Quixote when he heard him, "if any good will come to us tonight. Dost thou not hear what that clown is singing?" "I do," said Sancho. "But what has Roncesvalles chase to do with what we have in hand? He might as well just be singing about the ballad of Calinos. Or of Calainos. Yeah, sure. For any good or ill that come to us in our business, By this time the laborer had come up, and Don Quixote asked him, "Can you tell me, worthy friend, and God speed you, whereabouts here is the palace of the peerless princess Dona Dulcinea del Toboso?" "Señor," replied the lad, "I am a stranger, and I have only been only a few days in the town doing farm work for a rich farmer. In that house opposite there live the curate of the village and the sacristan, and both or either of them will be able to give your worship some account of this lady princess, for they have a list of all the people of El Toboso, though it is my belief that there is not a princess living in the whole of it. Many ladies there are of quality, and in her own house each of them may be a princess." "Well then, she I am inquiring for will be one of these, my friend," said Don Quixote. "Maybe so," replied the lad. "God be with you, for here comes the daylight." And without waiting for any more of his questions, he whipped on his mules. Sancho, seeing his master downcast and somewhat dissatisfied, said to him, "Señor, daylight will be here before long, and it will not do for us to let the sun find us in the street. It will be better for us to quit the city, and for your worship to hide in some forest in the neighborhood, and I will come back in the daytime, and I won't leave a nook or corner of the whole village that I won't search for the house, castle, or palace of my lady, and it will be hard luck for me if I don't find it. And as soon as I have found it, I will speak to her grace and tell her where and how your worship is waiting for her to arrange some plan for you to see her without any damage to her honor and reputation." "Sancho," said Don Quixote, "thou hast delivered 1,000 sentences condensed in the compass of a few words. I thank thee for the advice thou hast given me, and take it most gladly. Come, my son, let us go look for some place where I may hide while thou dost return, as thou sayest, to seek and speak with my lady, for whose discretion and courtesy I look for favors more than miraculous." Sancho was in a fever to get his master out of the town, lest he should discover the falsehood of the reply he had brought him in the Sierra Morena on behalf of Dulcinea, so he hastened their departure, which they took at once, and 2 miles out of the village they found a forest or thicket wherein Don Quixote ensconced himself, while Sancho returned to the city to speak to Dulcinea, in which embassy things befell him which demand fresh attention and a new chapter. Chapter 10, where it is related the crafty device Sancho adopted to enchant the lady Dulcinea, and other incidents as ludicrous as they are true. When the author of this great history comes to relate what is set down in this chapter, he says he would have preferred it to pass over in silence, fearing it would not be believed, because here Don Quixote's madness reaches the confines of the greatest that can be conceived, and even goes a couple of bowshots beyond the greatest. But, after all, though still under the same fear and apprehension, he has recorded it without adding to the story or leaving out a particle of the truth, and entirely disregarding the changes of falsehood that might have been brought, and entirely disregarding the charges of falsehood that might be brought against him. And he was right, for the truth may run fine, but will not break, and always rises above falsehoods as oil above water. And so, going on with his story, he says that as soon as Don Quixote had ensconced himself in the forest, oak grove, or wood near El Toboso, he bade Sancho return to the city, and not come into his presence again without having first spoken on his behalf to his lady, and begged of her that it might be her good pleasure to permit herself to be seen by her enslaved knight, and deign to bestow her blessing upon him, so that he might thereby hope for a happy issue in all his encounters and difficult enterprises. Sancho undertook to execute the task according to the instructions, and to bring back an answer as good as the one he brought back before. "Go, my son," said Don Quixote, "and be not dazed when thou findest thyself exposed to the light of that sun of beauty thou art going to seek. Happy thou above all the squires in the world. Bear in mind, and let it not escape thy memory, how she receives thee. If she changes color while thou art giving her my message, if she is agitated and disturbed at hearing my name, if she cannot rest upon her cushion, shouldst thou happily find her seated in the sumptuous state chamber proper to her rank, and should she be standing, observe if she poises herself now on one foot, now on the other, if she repeats 2 or 3 times the reply she gives thee, if she passes from gentleness to austerity, from asperity to tenderness." What is asperity? Hold on. asperity. Harshness of tone or manner. I see. Also, apparently, it's a materials science, defined as an unevenness of surface, roughness, ruggedness, and has implications in physics and seismology. Neat. Anyway. If she raises her hands to smooth her hair, though it be not disarranged. Hi, yes, can I help you? I'm trying to read the book. I'm sorry. Hi. In short, my son, observe all her actions and motions, for if thou wilt report them to me as they were, I will gather what she hides in the recesses of her heart as regards my love. For I would have thee know, Sancho, if thou knowest it not, that with lovers the outward actions and motions they give way to when their loves are in question are the faithful messengers that carry the news of what is going on in the depths of their hearts. Go, my friend, may better fortune than mine attend thee, and bring thee a happier issue than that which I await in dread in this dreary solitude. I will go and return quickly, said Sancho. Cheer up that little heart of yours, master mine, for at the present moment you seem to have got one no bigger than a hazelnut. Remember what they say, that a stout heart breaks bad luck, and that where there are no fletches there are no pegs, and moreover they say, the hare jumps up where it's not looked for. I say this because, if we could not find my lady's palaces or castles tonight, now that it is daylight, I count upon finding them when I least expect it. And once found, leave it to me to manage her. Verily, Sancho, said Don Quixote, thou dost always bring in thy proverbs happily. Whatever we deal with, may God give me better luck in what I am anxious about. With this, Sancho wheeled about and gave Dapple the stick, and Don Quixote remained behind, seated on his horse, resting in his stirrups, and leaning on the end of his lance, filled with sad and troubled foreboding. Hi. That was a book. Anyway. And there we will leave him, and accompany Sancho, who went off no less serious and troubled than he left his master, so much so that as soon as he had got out of the thicket, and, looking round, saw that Don Quixote was not within sight, he dismounted from his ass, seating himself at the foot of a tree, began to commune with himself, saying, Now, brother Sancho, let us know where your worship is going. Are you going to look for some ass that has been lost? Not at all. Then what are you going to look for? I'm going to look for a princess, that's all, and in her for the sun of beauty and the whole of heaven at once. And where do you expect to find all this, Sancho? Where? Why, in the great city of El Toboso. Well, and for whom are you going to look for her? For the famous knight Don Quixote of La Mancha, who rights wrongs, gives food to those who thirst, and drink to the hungry. Let's see here. Well, that's very well, but do you know her house, Sancho? My master says it will be some royal palace or grand castle. And have you ever seen her by any chance? Neither I nor my master ever saw her. And does it strike you that it would be just and right if the El Toboso people, finding out you were here with the intention of going to tamper with their princesses and trouble their ladies, were to come and cudgel your ribs and not leave a whole bone in you? They would indeed have very good reason if they did not see that I am under orders, and that you are a messenger, my friend. No blame belongs to you. Don't you trust to that, Sancho, for the Manchingan folk are as hot-tempered as they are honest, won't put up with the liberties of anybody. Won't put up with liberties from anybody, excuse me. My lord, if they get the scent of you, it will be worse for you. I promise you. Be off, you scoundrel. Let the boat fall. Why should I go looking for 3 feet on a cat to please another man? And what is more, when looking for Dulcinea, we'll be looking for Marcia in Ravenna, or the bachelor in Salamanca. The devil, and nobody else has mixed me up in this business. Such was the soliloquy Sancho held with himself, and all the conclusion he could come to was to say to himself again, well, there's remedy for everything except death, under whose yoke we all have to pass, whether we like it or not when life is finished. I have seen by 1,000 signs that this master of mine is a madman fit to be tied, and for that matter, I too am not behind him. For I'm a greater fool than he is when I follow him and serve him. If there's any truth in the proverb that says, Tell me what company thou keepest, and I'll tell thee what thou art. And in that other, not with whom thou art bred, but with whom thou art fed. Well then, if he be mad as he is, and with a madness that mostly takes one thing for another, and white for black, and black for white, as was seen when he said the windmills were giants, and the monks mules, dromedaries, flocks of sheep, armies of enemies, and much more to the same tune, it will not be very hard to make him believe that some country girl, the first I come across, is the Lady Dulcinea, and if he does not believe it, I'll swear it, and if he should swear, I'll swear again, and if he persists, I'll persist still more. So as, come what may, to have my quoit lay always over the peg, maybe, by holding out in this way, I may put a stop to his sending me on messages of this kind another time, or maybe he will think, as I suspect he will, that one of those wicked enchanters, who he says have a spite against him, has changed her form for the sake of doing him an ill turn and injuring him. With his reflection, Sancho made his mind easy, counting the business as good as settled, and stayed there till the afternoon, so as to make Don Quixote think he had enough time to go to El Toboso and return. Toboso, towards the spot where he stood, 3 peasant girls on 3 colts or fillies, for the author does not make the point clear, though it is more likely they were she-asses, the usual mount with village girls, but as it is of no great consequence, we need not stop to prove it. To be brief, the instant Sancho saw the peasant girls, he returned full speed to seek his master, and found him sighing and uttering 1,000 passionate lamentations. When Don Quixote saw him, he exclaimed, "What news, Sancho, my friend? Am I to mark this day with a white stone or a black?" "Your worship," replied Sancho, "had better mark it with ruddle, like the inscriptions on the wall of classrooms, that those who see it may see it plain." "Then thou bringest good news?" said Don Quixote. "So good," replied Sancho, "that your worship has only to spur Rocinante, and get out into the open field to see the Lady Dulcinea del Toboso, who, with 2 others, damsels of hers, is coming to see your worship." "Oh, holy God! What art thou saying, Sancho, my friend? Take care thou art not deceiving me, or seeking by false joy to cheer my real sadness." "What could I get by deceiving your worship?" returned Sancho, "especially when it will so soon be shown whether I tell the truth or not. Oh, come, Signor, push on. You will see the princesses our mistress coming, robed and adorned, in fact, like what she is. Her damsels and she are all one glow of gold, all bunches of pearls, all diamonds, all rubies, all cloth of brocade, more than 10 borders, with their hair loose on their shoulders like so many sunbeams playing with the wind. And moreover, they come mounted on 3 piebald cackneys. Cackneys? On 3 piebald cackneys, the finest sight ever you saw. What is it? Sorry, hackneys, you mean, Sancho, said Don Quixote. "Oh, there's not much difference between cackneys and hackneys," said Sancho, "but no matter what they come on, there they are, the finest ladies one could wish for, especially my lady, the Princess Dulcinea, who staggers one's senses." "Well, let us go, Sancho, my son," said Don Quixote, "and in guerdon of the... Guerdon? Hold on. What the... Very strange. I think one of my... Yeah, whatever, it's not the end of the world. Kurt? Guerdon. A reward or recompense. I see. As expected as it is good, I bestow upon thee the best soil I shall win in the first adventure I may have. For if that does not satisfy thee, I promise thee the foals I shall have this year from my 3 mares that thou knowest are in foal on our village common." "I'll take the foals," said Sancho, "for it is not quite certain that the spoils of the first adventure will be good ones." By this time they had cleared the wood, and saw the 3 village lasses close at hand. Don Quixote looked all along the road to El Toboso, and as he could see nobody except the 3 peasant girls, he was completely puzzled, and asked Sancho if it was outside the city he had left them. "How outside the city?" returned Sancho. Are your worship's eyes in the back of your head, that you can see that these who are coming here, shining like the very sun at noonday? Oh, now, may God. I see nothing, Sancho, said Don Quixote, but 3 country girls on 3 jackasses. Now may God deliver me from the devil, said Sancho. And can it be that your worship takes 3 hackneys, or whatever they're called, as white as the driven snow, for jackasses? By the Lord, I could tear my beard if that was the case. Well, I can only say, Sancho, my friend, said Don Quixote, that it is as plain as they are jackasses or jennyasses as that I am Don Quixote and thou Sancho Panza, and at any rate they seem to me to be so. Hush, senor, said Sancho, and don't talk that way, but open your eyes and come and pay your respects to the lady of your thoughts, who is close upon us now. And with these words he advanced to receive the 3 village lasses, and dismounting from Dapple, caught hold of one of the asses of the 3 country girls by the halter, dropping on both knees on the ground, and said, Queen and Princess and Duchess of Beauty, may it please your haughtiness and greatness to receive into your favor and goodwill your captive knight, who stands there turned into marble stone, and quite stupefied and benumbed at finding himself in your magnificent presence. I am Sancho Panza, his squire, and he is the vagabond knight Don Quixote of La Mancha, otherwise called the Knight of the Rueful Countenance. Don Quixote had by this time placed himself on his knees beside Sancho, and with eyes starting out of his head and a puzzled gaze, was regarding her whom Sancho called queen and lady, as he could see nothing in her except a village lass, and not a very well-favored one, for she was platter-faced and snub-nosed. He was perplexed and bewildered, and did not venture to open his lips. The country girls at the same time were astonished to see these 2 men so different in appearance on their knees, preventing their companion from going on. She, however, who had been stopped, breaking silence, and said angrily, Get out of the way, bad luck to you, and let us pass, for we are in a hurry. To which Sancho returned, Oh, princess and universal lady of El Toboso, is not your magnanimous heart softened by seeing the pillar and prop of knight-errantry on his knees before your sublimated presence? On hearing this, the others exclaimed, Whoa, then. Why, I'm rubbing thee down, she asked of my father-in-law. See how the lordlings come to make game of the village girls now, as if we could not chaff, as if we here could not chaff as well as themselves. Go on your way, and let us go ours, and it will be better for you. Get up, Sancho, said Don Quixote at this. I see that fortune, with evil done to me unsated still, has taken possession of all the roads by which any comfort may reach this wretched soul that I carry in my flesh, and thou, highest perfection of excellence that can be desired, utmost limit of grace in human shape, brought cloud... Hold on. Sole relief of this afflicted heart that adores thee, though the malign enchanter that persecutes me has brought clouds and cataracts on my eyes, and to them and them only transformed thy unparagoned beauty, and changed thy features into those of a poor peasant girl. So, if so be he has not the same time changed mine into those of some monster, to render them loathsome in thy sight, refuse not to look upon me with tenderness and love, seeing in this submission that I make on my knees to thy transformed beauty with humility with which my soul adores thee. Oh, heyday, my grandfather, cried the gull, much I care for your love-making. Get out of the way and let us pass, and we'll thank you. I'm sorry, I don't know about platter-faced. I need to know. Platter-faced. I mean, yeah, okay. A broad, flat face. Sounds about right. Anyway, I also see a lot of a lot of platters with faces. But anyway, let me see here. Boop. Sancho stood aside and let her go, very well pleased to have got out so well of the hobble he was in. The instant the village lass who had done duty for Dulcinea found herself free, prodding her cackney with a spike she had at the end of a stick, she set off at full speed across the field. The she-ass, however, feeling the point more acutely than usual, began cutting such capers that it flung the lady Dulcinea to the ground, seeing which Don Quixote ran to raise her up, and Sancho to fix and girth the pack saddle, which had also slipped under the ass's belly. The pack saddle being secured, as Don Quixote was about to lift his enchanted mistress in his arms and put her upon her beast, the lady, getting up for the ground, saved him the trouble, for, going back a little, she took a short run, and putting hands on the croup of the ass, she dropped into the saddle more lightly than a falcon, and sat astride like a man, whereat Sancho said, "Rogue, but our lady is lighter than a lanner." "Than a lanner? And might teach the cleverest Cordovan or Mexican how to mount. She cleared the back of the saddle in one jump, and without spurs she is making the hackney go like a zebra, and her damsels are no way behind her, for they all fly like the wind." Which was the truth, for as soon as they saw Dulcinea mounted, they pushed on after her, and sped away without looking back for more than half a league. What is a lanner? I guess it's a falcon. Yes. A medium-sized bird of prey. I see. Now where was I? Don Quixote followed them with his eyes, and when they were no longer in sight, he turned to Sancho and said, "How now, Sancho, thou seest how I am hated by enchanters, and see to what a length the malice and spite they bear me go, when they seek to deprive me of the happiness it would give me to see my lady in her own proper form. The fact is, I was born to be an example of misfortune, and the target to mark at which the arrows of adversity are aimed and directed. Observe, too, Sancho, that these traitors were not content in changing and transforming my Dulcinea, but they transformed and changed her into a shape as mean and ill-favored as that of the village girl yonder, and at the same time they robbed her of that which is such a peculiar property of ladies of distinction, that is to say, the sweet fragrance that comes of being always among perfumes and flowers. For I must tell thee, Sancho, that when I approached to put Dulcinea on her hackney, as thou sayest it was, though it appeared to me as she asked, she gave me a whiff of raw garlic that made my head reel and poisoned my very heart." "Oh, scum of the earth!" cried Sancho at this. "Oh, miserable, spiteful enchanters! Oh, that I could see you all strung by the gills like sardines on a twig! Ye know a great deal, ye can do a great deal, and ye do a great deal more, and it ought to have been enough for you, ye scoundrels, to have changed the pearls of my lady's eyes into oak galls, and her hair of purest gold into the bristles of a red ox's tail, and in short all her features from fair to foul, without meddling with her spell. For by that we might somehow have found out what was hidden underneath that ugly rind, though, to tell the truth, I have never perceived her ugliness, but only her beauty, which was raised to the highest pitch of perfection by a mole she had on her right lip, like a moustache, with 7 or 8 red hairs like threads of gold, and more than a palm long." Interesting. "From the correspondence which exists between those of the face and those of the body," said Don Quixote, "Dulcinea must have another mole resembling that on the thick of the thigh, on that side which she has the one on her face, but the hairs of the leg thou hast mentioned are very long for moles." "Well, all I can say is that they were as plain as could be," replied Sancho. "I believe it, my friend," returned Don Quixote, "for nature bestowed nothing on Dulcinea that was not perfect and well finished, and so if she had 100 moles like the one thou hast described in her, they would not be moles, but moons and shining stars. But tell me, Sancho, that which seemed to me to be a pack saddle thou wert fixing, was it a flat saddle or a side saddle?" "It was neither," replied Sancho, but a Janetta saddle, with a field covering worth half a kingdom. So rich is it. "And that I could not see all of this, Sancho," said Don Quixote. "Once more I say, and will say 1,000 times, I am the most unfortunate of men." Sancho the rogue had enough to do to hide his laughter at hearing the simplicity of the master he had so nicely befooled. At length, after a good deal more conversation had passed between them, they remounted their beast and followed the road to Saragossa, which they expected to reach in time to take part in a certain grand festival which is held every year in that illustrious city. But before they got there, things happened to them, so many, so important, and so strange that they deserve to be recorded and read, as will be seen further on. Okay, now hang on, let me see here. I don't know what a Janetta saddle is. Interesting. Some flavor of Western saddle. That's just a bag. Okay, a flavor, design, variations, types. The weight, rigging placement. Okay, well, something's got my caps lock in my, Hold on, let me see here. I gotta deal with this. Okay, there it is, yes. By holding the function key and caps lock. Maybe. Okay, it works now. Everything's back to normal. Sorry, I had to fix that. Ah, these chapters are... Ahem. Chapter 11 of the strange adventure which the valiant Don Quixote had with the car or cart of the Cortes of Death. Dejected beyond measure did Don Quixote pursue his journey, turning over in his mind the cruel trick the enchanters had played him in changing his lady Dulcinea into the vile shape of the village lass. Nor could he think of any way of restoring her to her original form, and these reflections were so absorbed him that without being aware of it he let go of Rocinante's bridle, and he, perceiving the liberty that was granted him, stopped at every step to crop the fresh grass with which the plain abounded. Sancho called him from his reverie. "Melancholy, señor," said he, "was made not for beasts, but for men. But if men give way to it overmuch, they turn to beasts. Control yourself, your worship. Be yourself again. Gather up Rocinante's reins. Cheer up, rouse yourself, and show that gallant spirit that knights errant ought to have. What the devil is this? What weakness is this? Are we here or in France? The devil fly away with all the Dulcineas in the world. For the well-being of a single knight-errant is of more consequence than all the enchantments and transformation on earth." "Hush, Sancho," said Don Quixote in a weak and faint voice. "Hush, and utter no blasphemies against that enchanted lady, for I alone am to blame for her misfortune and hard fate. A calamity has come of the hatred the wicked bear me." "So I say," returned Sancho, his heart rend in twain, "I trow, who saw her once to see her now." "Thou mayest well say that, Sancho," replied Don Quixote, "as thou sawest her in the full perfection of her beauty. For the enchantment does not go so far as to pervert thy vision or hide her loveliness from thee. Against me alone and against my eyes is the strength of its venom directed. Nevertheless, there is one thing which has occurred to me. and that is thou didst ill describe her beauty to me, for as well as I recollect, thou said that her eyes were pearls, but eyes that are like pearls are rather the eyes of a sea bream than of a lady, and I am persuaded that Dulcinea's must be green emeralds, full and soft, with 2 rainbows for eyebrows. Take away those pearls from her eyes and transfer them to her teeth, for beyond a doubt, Sancho, thou hast taken one for the other, the eyes for the teeth. Very likely, said Sancho, for her beauty bewildered me as much as her ugliness did your worship. But let us leave it all to God, who alone knows what is to happen in this vale of tears, in this evil world of ours, where there is hardly a thing to be found without some mixture of wickedness, roguery, and rascality. But one thing, Signor, troubles me more than all the rest, and that is thinking what it is to be done when your worship conquers some giant or some other knight, and orders him to go and present himself before the beauty of the Lady Dulcinea. Where is this poor giant or this poor wretch of a vanquished knight to find her? I think I can see them wandering all over El Toboso, looking like naughties and asking for my Lady Dulcinea, and even if they meet her in the middle of the street, they won't know her any more than they would know my father. Would not know her any more than they would my father. What is a naughty? Naughties are a type of seabird, allegedly, which contains genus of seabirds in the family Leridae, which also contains the gulls, terns, and skimmers. They seem very gray or brown. There's also, they come in black, like the black naughty. Interesting. Fascinating. Anyway, now that we've answered that question. Now, where was I? Perhaps, Sancho, returned Don Quixote, the enchantment does not go so far as to deprive conquered and presented giants and knights of the power of recognizing Dulcinea. We'll try by experiment with 1 or 2 of them, of the first I vanquish and send to her, whether they see her or not, by commanding them to return and give me an account of what happened to them in this respect. I declare, I think what your worship has proposed is excellent, said Sancho, and that by this plan we shall find out what we want to know, and if it be that it is only from your worship she is hidden, the misfortune will be more yours than hers, but as long as the Lady Dulcinea is well and happy, we on our part will make the best of it, and get on as well as we can, seeking our adventures and leaving time to take his own course, for he is the best physician for these and greater ailments. Don Quixote was about to reply to Sancho Panza, but he was prevented by a cart crossing the road full of the most diverse and strange personages and figures that could be imagined. He who led the mules acted as carter was a hideous demon. The cart was open to the sky without a tilt or cane roof, and the first figure that presented itself to Don Quixote's eyes was that of Death itself with a human face, next to an angel with large painted wings, and at one side an emperor with a crown to all appearance of gold on his head. At the feet of Death was the god called Cupid without his bandage, but with his bow and quiver and arrows. There was also a knight in full armor, except that he had no morion or helmet, but only a hat decked with plumes of divers colors, and along with these there were others with a variety of costumes and faces. All this, unexpectedly encountered, took Don Quixote somewhat aback, and struck terror into the heart of Sancho, but the next instant Don Quixote was glad of it, believing that some new perilous adventure had presented itself to him, and under this impression, and with a spirit prepared to face any danger, he planted himself in front of the cart, and in a loud and menacing tone exclaimed, "Carter, or coachman, or devil, or whatever thou art, tell me at once who thou art, whither thou art going, and who these folks are thou carriest in thy wagon, which looks more like Charon's boat than an ordinary cart." To which the devil, stopping the cart, answered quietly, "Signor, we are players of Anguelo el Malo's company. We've been acting in the play of Cortes of Death this morning, which is the octave of Corpus Christi in a village behind that hill. and we have to act in this afternoon in that village which you can see from this, and as it is so near, and to save the trouble of undressing and dressing again, we go in costumes in which we perform. The lads there appears as Death, and that other as an angel. That woman, the manager's wife, plays the queen. This one, the soldier, that the emperor, and I, the devil. And I am one of the principal characters of the play. For in this company I take the leading parts. And if you want to know anything more about us, ask me, and I will answer with the utmost exactitude. For as I am a devil, I am up to everything. By the faith of a knight-errant, replied Don Quixote. When I saw this card, I fancied some great adventure was presenting itself to me. But I declare one must touch with the hand what appears to the eye, if illusions are to be avoided. Godspeed you, good people, keep your festival, and remember, if you demand me aught wherein I can render you a service, I will do it gladly and willingly. For from a child I was fond of the play, and in my youth a keen lover of the actor's art. While they were talking, fate so willed it that one of the company, in a mummer's dress with a great number of bells, and armed with 3 blown ox bladders at the end of a stick, joined them, and this merry Andrew, approaching Don Quixote, began flourishing his stick and banging on the ground with the bladders and cutting capers with the great jingling of the bells, with which untoward apparition so startled Rocinante that, in spite of Don Quixote's efforts to hold him, taking the bit between his teeth, he set off across the plain with greater speed than the bones of his anatomy ever gave any promise of. Sancho, who thought his master was in danger of being thrown, jumped off Dapple and ran in all haste to help him, but by the time he reached him, he was already on the ground, and beside him was Rocinante, who had come down with his master, the usual end and upshot of Rocinante's vivacity and high spirits. But the moment Sancho quitted his beast to go and help Don Quixote, the dancing devil with the bladders jumped up on Dapple and beating him with them, more by the fright and noise than by the pain of the blows, made him fly across the fields toward the village which they were going to hold their festival. Sancho witnessed Dapple's career and his master's fall, and did not know which of the 2 cases of need he should attend to first. But in the end, like a good squire and a good servant, he let his love for his master prevail over his affection for his ass, though every time he saw the bladders rise in the air and come down on the hind quarters of his Dapple, he felt the pains and terrors of death, and he would have rather had the perplexity he came to where... And he would have had rather the blows of the apples on his own eyes than on the least hair of his ass's tail. In this trouble and perplexity, he came to where Don Quixote lay, in a far sorrier plight than he liked, and having helped him to mount Rocinante, he asked him, "Señor, the devil has carried off my Dapple." "What devil?" asked Don Quixote. "The one with the bladders," said Sancho. "Then I will recover him," said Don Quixote, "even if he be shut up with him in the deepest and darkest dungeons of hell. Follow me, Sancho, for the cart goes slowly, and with the mules of it I will make good loss of Dapple." "You need not take the trouble, Señor," said Sancho. "Keep cool, for, as I now see, the devil has let Dapple go, and he is coming back to his old quarters." And so it turned out, for having come down... Sorry. Where was I? Yes. But the devil has let Dapple go, and he is coming back to his old quarters. And so it turned out, for having come down with Dapple, in imitation of Don Quixote and Rocinante, the devil made off on foot to the town, and the ass came back to his master. "For all that," said Don Quixote, "it will be well to visit the discourtesy of that devil upon some of those in the cart, even if it were the emperor himself." "Don't think of it, your worship," returned Sancho. "Take my advice, and never meddle with actors, for they are a favored class. I myself have known an actor taken up for 2 murders, and yet come off scot-free. Remember that, as they are merry folk who give pleasure, everyone favors and protects them, and helps and makes much of them. Above all, when they are those of the royal companies and under patent, all or most of whom in dress and appearance look like princes." "Still, for all that," said Don Quixote, "the player devil must not go off boasting, even if the whole human race favors him." So saying, he made for the cart, which was now very near the town, and shouting as he went, "Stay, halt, ye merry, jovial crew! I want to teach you how to treat asses and animals that serve the squires of knight-errant for steeds." So loud were the shouts of Don Quixote that those in the cart heard and understood them, and guessing by the words what the speaker's intention was, Death in an instant jumped out of the cart, and the Emperor, Devil Carter, and the angel after him. Nor did the Queen or the god Cupid stay behind. They all armed themselves with stones and formed a line, prepared to receive Don Quixote on the points of their pebbles. Don Quixote, when he saw them drawn in such a gallant array, with uplifted arms ready for a mighty discharge of stones, checked Rocinante and began to consider in what way he could attack them with the least danger to himself. As he halted, Sancho came up, and seeing him disposed to attack this well-ordered squadron, said to him it would be the height of madness to attempt such an enterprise. Remember, Signor, that against the sops from the brook, and plenty of them, there is no defensive armor in the world, except to stow oneself away under a brass bell, and besides, one should remember that it is rashness and not valor for a single man to attack an army that has death in it, and where emperors fight in person, with angels good and bad, to help them. And if this reflection will not make you keep quiet, perhaps it will to know for certain that among all these, though they look like kings, princes, and emperors, there is not a single knight-errant. Now indeed thou hast hit the point, Sancho, said Don Quixote, which may and should turn me from the resolution I had already formed. I cannot and must not draw sword, as I have many a time before told thee. Against anyone who is not a dubbed knight, it is for thee, Sancho, if thou wilt, to take vengeance for the wrong done to thy dapple, and I will help thee from here by shouts and solitary counsels. But there is no occasion to take vengeance on anyone, Signor, replied Sancho, for it is not part of good Christians to revenge wrongs, and besides, I will arrange it with my ass to leave his grievance to my good will and pleasure, and that is to live in peace as long as heaven grants me life. Well, said Don Quixote, if that be thy determination. Good Sancho, sensible Sancho. Christian Sancho, honest Sancho, let us leave these phantoms alone and turn to the pursuit of better and worthier adventures. For, from what I see of this country, we cannot fail to find plenty of marvelous ones in it. He at once wheeled about. Sancho ran to take possession of his dapple. Death and his flying squadron returned into their cart and pursued their journey. And thus the dread adventure of the cart of death ended happily, thanks to the advice Sancho gave his master, who had the following day a fresh adventure of no less thrilling interest than the last, with an enamored knight-errant. Gonna have a quick sip of water again. Golly. Chapter 12 of the strange adventure which befell the valiant Don Quixote with the bold knight of the mirrors. The night succeeding the day of the encounter with death, Don Quixote and his squire passed under some tall, shady trees, and Don Quixote, at Sancho's persuasion, ate a little from the store carried by Dapple, and over their supper Sancho said to his master, Signor, what a fool I should have looked if I had chosen for my reward the spoils of the first adventure your worship received, instead of the foals of the 3 mares. After all, a sparrow in the hand is better than a vulture on the wing. Well, at the same time, Sancho, replied Don Quixote, if thou hadst let me attack them as I wanted, at the very least the Emperor's gold crown and the Cupid's painted wings would have fallen to thee as spoils, for I should have taken them by force and given them into thy hands. The scepters and crowns of those play-actor emperors, said Sancho, were never yet pure gold, but only brass foil or tin. That is true, said Don Quixote. For it would not be right that the accessories of the drama should be real, instead being mere fictions and semblances, like the drama itself, towards which Sancho, and as a necessary consequence, towards those who represent and produce it, I would that thou wert favorably disposed, for they are all instruments of great good to the state, placing us before at every step a mirror in which we may see vividly displayed what goes on in human life. Nor is there any similitude that shows us more faithfully what we are and ought to be than the play and the players. Come, tell me, hast thou not seen a play acted in which kings, emperors, pontiffs, knights, ladies, and divers other personages were introduced? One plays the villain, another the knave, this one the merchant, that the soldier, one the sharp-witted fool, another the foolish lover. And when the play is over, they have put off the dresses they wore at all the actors become equal. Yes, I have seen that, said Sancho. Well then, said Don Quixote, the same thing happens in the comedy and life of this world, where some play emperors, others popes, and in short all the characters that can be brought into a play, but when it is over, that is to say, when life ends, death strips them of all their garments that distinguish one from the other, and all are equal in the grave. A fine comparison, said Sancho, though not so new, but that I have heard it many and many a time. As well as that other one of the game of chess, how so long as the game lasts, each piece has its own particular office, and when the game is finished, they are all mixed, jumbled up, and shaken together, and stowed away in the bag, which is much like ending life in the grave. Excuse me. A fine comparison. Mate. Thou art growing less doltish and more shrewd every day, Sancho, said Don Quixote. Aye, said Sancho, it must be that some of your worship's shrewdness sticks to me. Land that of itself is barren and dry, will come to yield good fruit if you dung it and till it. That's what I mean is that your worship's conversation has been the dung that has fallen on the barren soil of my dry wit, and the time I have been in your service and society has been the tillage. And with the help of this I hope to yield fruit in abundance that will not fall away or slide from those paths of good breeding that your worship has made in my parched understanding. Don Quixote laughed at Sancho's affected phraseology, and perceived that what he said about his improvement was true. For now and then he spoke in a way that surprised him, though always, or mostly, when Sancho tried to talk fine and attempted polite language, he wound up toppling over the summit of his simplicity into the abyss of his ignorance. And where he showed his culture and his memory to the greatest advantage was in dragging in proverbs, no matter whether they had any bearing or not upon the subject at hand, as may have been seen already and will be noticed in the course of this history. In conversation of this kind they passed a good part of the night, but Sancho felt a desire to let down the curtains of his eyes. As he used to say, he wanted to go to sleep. As he used to say when he wanted to go to sleep, and stripping Dapple, he left him at liberty to graze his fill. He did not remove Rocinante's saddles, as his master's express orders were, that so long as they were in the field or not sleeping under a roof, Rocinante was not to be stripped, the ancient usage established and observed by knights errant being to take off the bridle and leave it on the saddle bow. But to remove the saddle from the horse, never. Sancho acted accordingly. I've lost my place. And gave him the same liberty he had given Dapple, between whom and Rocinante there was a friendship so unequalled and so strong that it is handed down by tradition from father to son, that the author of this veracious history devoted some special chapters to it, which, in order to preserve the propriety and decorum due to a history so heroic, he did not insert therein, although at times he forgets this resolution of his, and describes how eagerly the two beasts would scratch one another when they were together, and how, when they were tired or full, Rocinante would lay his neck across Dapple's, stretching half a yard or more on the other side, and the pair would stand thus, gazing thoughtfully on the ground, for 3 days, or at least so as long as they were left alone, and hunger did not drive them to go and look for food. I may add, they say the author left it on record that he likened their friendship to that of Nisus and Euryalus, and Pylades and Orestes. Oreste? Good question. They must be Greek. And if that be so, it may be perceived to the admiration of mankind how firm the friendship must have been between these two peaceful animals, shaming men who preserve friendship with one another so badly. This is why it was said, For friend no longer is their friend, the reeds turn lances now. And someone else has sung, friend to friend, the bug, etc. Hold on, you know what? Let me actually... Nisus? Her friend serving under Aeneas in the Aeneid, the Augustan epic by Virgil, the foray among the enemy, blah blah blah. I see. So I was at least correct with that one, with them being Greek. And then and another Greek. I had a feeling. I see, one was the son of Agamemnon. I see. Fascinating. Anyway, now that we've at least know that. Now where was I? And let no one fancy that the author was at all astray when he compared the friendship of these animals to that of men, for men have received many lessons from beasts and learned many important things, as, for example, the clyster of the stork, vomit and gratitude from the dog, watchfulness from the crane, foresight from the ant, modesty from the elephant, and loyalty from the horse. Sancho at last fell asleep at the foot of a cork tree, while Don Quixote dozed at that of a sturdy oak. But a short time only had elapsed when a noise he heard behind him awoke him. And rising up startled, he listened and looked in the direction the noise came from, and perceived two men on horseback, one of whom, letting himself drop from the saddle, and said to the other, "Dismount, my friend, and take the bridles off the horses, for, so far as I can see, this place will furnish grass for them, and the solitude and silence my love-sick thoughts need of." And he said this, he stretched himself upon the ground, and as he flung himself down, the armor in which he was clad rattled. Whereupon Don Quixote perceived that he must be a knight-errant, and going over to Sancho, who was asleep, shook him by the arm, and with no small difficulty brought him back to his senses, and said in a low voice to him, "Brother Sancho, we have got an adventure." "Oh, God, send us a good one," said Sancho, "and where may her ladyship the adventure be?" "Where, Sancho?" replied Don Quixote. "Turn thine eyes and look, and thou wilt see stretched there a knight-errant who, it strikes me, is not over and above happy, for I saw him fling himself off his horse and throw himself on the ground with a certain air of dejection, and his armor rattled as he fell." "Well," said Sancho, "how does your worship make that out to be an adventure?" "I do not mean to say," returned Don Quixote, "that it is a complete adventure, but that it is the beginning of one. For it is in this way adventures begin. But listen, for it seems he is tuning a lute or guitar, and from the way he is spitting and clearing his chest, he must be getting ready to sing something." "Faith, you are right," said Sancho, "and no doubt he is some enamored knight." "There is no knight-errant that is not," said Don Quixote, "but let us listen to him, for if he sings, by that thread we shall extract the ball of his thoughts, because out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh." Sancho was about to reply to his master, but the Knight of the Grove's voice, which was neither very bad nor very good, stopped him, and listening attentively, the pair heard him sing this: "Your pleasure, prithee, lady, my unfold, declare the terms that I am to obey. My will to yours submissively I mold, and from your law my feet shall never stray. Would you I die to silent grief a prey, then count me even now as dead and cold. Would you I tell my woes in some new way, then shall my tale by life itself Then shall my tale by love itself be told, the unison of opposites to prove. Of the soft wax and diamond heart am I, but still obedient to the laws of love. Here hard or soft I offer you my breast, whate'er you grave or stamp thereon shall rest, indelible for all eternity. With an "ah me" that seemed to be drawn from the most innermost recesses of his heart, the Knight of the Grove brought his lay to an end, and shortly afterwards exclaimed in a melancholy and piteous voice, "O fairest and most ungrateful woman on earth, what can it be, most serene Casildea, De Vandalia. De Vandalia? De Vandalia. Cassildia de Val... Cassildia de Vandalia. There we go. That thou wilt suffer this thy captive knight to waste away and perish in ceaseless wanderings and rude and arduous toils. Is it not enough that I have compelled all the knights of Navarre, all the Leonese, all the Tartesians, all the Castilians, and finally all the knights of La Mancha to confess thee the most beautiful in the world? Oh, not so, said Don Quixote at this, for I am of La Mancha, and I have never confessed anything of the sort, nor could I, nor should I confess a thing so much to the prejudice of my lady's beauty. Thou seest how this knight is raving, Sancho. But let us listen, perhaps he will tell us more about himself. That he will, returned Sancho, for he seems in a mood to bewail himself for a month at a stretch. But this was not the case, for the Knight of the Grove... But the Knight of the Grove, hearing voices near him, instead of continuing his lamentation, stood up and exclaimed in a distinct but courteous tone, Who goes there? What are you? Do you belong to the number of the happy or of the miserable? Of the miserable, answered Don Quixote. Then come to me, said he of the Grove, and rest assured that it is to woe itself and affliction itself you come. Don Quixote, finding himself answered in such a soft and courteous manner, went over to him, and so did Sancho. The doleful knight took Don Quixote by the arm, and saying, Sit down here, Sir Knight, for that you are one, and of those that profess knight-errantry, it is to me a sufficient proof to have found you in this place, where solitude and night, a natural couch and proper retreat of knights-errant, keep you company. To which Don made answer, A knight I am of the profession you mention, and though sorrows, misfortunes, and calamity have made my heart their abode, the compassion I feel for the misfortunes of others has not been thereby banished from it. For what you have just now sung, I gather that yours spring from love. I mean from the love you bear that fair ingrate you named in your lament. In the meantime, they had seated themselves together on the hard ground peaceably and sociably, just as if, as soon as day broke, they were not going to break one another's heads. Are you, Sir Knight, in love, perchance? Asked he of the Grove of Don Quixote. By mischance I am, replied Don Quixote, though the ills arising from well-bestowed affections should be esteemed favors rather than misfortunes. That is true, returned he of the Grove, if scorn did not unsettle our reason and understanding, for if it be excessive it looks like revenge. I was never scorned by my lady, said Don Quixote. Certainly not, said Sancho, who stood close by, for my lady is as a lamb and softer than a roll of butter. Is this your squire? Asked he of the Grove. He is, said Don Quixote. I never yet saw a squire, said he of the Grove, who ventured to speak when his master was speaking. At least there is mine, who is as big as his father, and it cannot be proved that he has ever opened his lips when I am speaking. Oh, by my faith, then, said Sancho, I have spoken, and am fit to speak in the presence of one as much, or even then, but never mind. It only makes it worse to stir it. The squire of the Grove took Sancho by the arm, and saying to him, Let us two go where we can talk in squire style as much as we please, and leave these gentlemen our masters to fight it out over the story of their loves, and depend upon it, daybreak will find them at it without having made an end of it. So be it by all means, said Sancho. I will tell you, your worship, who I am, that you may see whether I am to be reckoned among the numbers of the most talkative squires. With this, the two squires withdrew to one side, and between them there passed a conversation as droll as that which passed between their masters was serious. Just doing some packing. Alright, let's see here. Chapter 13, in which is continued the adventure of the Knight of the Grove, together with the sensible, original, and tranquil colloquy that passed between the two squires. Hold on, I need to know what a colloquy is. I'm going to assume that it's like Colloquy? Oh, okay. It's just a conversation. Never heard of that one before. Isn't it nice? I feel like I've learned all kinds of new words. Granted, I don't use a lot of them, but... The knights and the squires made two parties, these telling the story of their lives, the others the story of their loves, but the history relates first of all the conversations of the servants, and afterwards takes up that of the masters. And it says that, withdrawing a little from the others, he of the grove said to Sancho, "A hard life is what we lead and live, señor. We that are squires to knights errantry, verily we eat our bread in the sweat of our faces, which is one of the curses God laid on our first parents. It may be said, too," added Sancho, "that we eat it in the chill of our bodies. For who gets more heat and cold than the miserable squires of knight-errantry? Even so, it would be not so bad if we had something to eat, for woes are lighter if there's bread, but sometimes we go a day or two without breaking our fast, except with the wind that blows." "All that," said he of the grove, "may be endured and put up with when we have hopes of reward, for unless the knight-errant he serves is excessively unlucky, after a few turns the squire will at least find himself rewarded with a fine government of some island or some fair country." "Aye," said Sancho, "I've already told my master that I shall be content with the government of some island, and he is so noble and generous that he has promised it to me ever so many times." "I," said he of the grove, "shall be satisfied with a canonry for my services, and my master has already assigned me one." "Oh, your master," said Sancho, "no doubt is a knight in the church line, and can bestow rewards of that sort on his good squire, but mine is only a layman, though I remember some clever, but, to my mind, designing people strove to persuade him to try and become an archbishop. He, however, would not be anything but an emperor, but I was trembling all the time lest he should take a fancy to go into the church, not finding in myself fit to hold office in it, for I may tell you, though I seem a man, I am no better than a beast for the church." "Well, then you are wrong there," said he of the grove, "for those island governments are not all satisfactory. Some are awkward, some are poor, some are dull, and in short, the highest and choicest brings with it a heavy burden of cares and troubles, which the unhappy wight to whose lot it has fallen bears upon his shoulders. Far better would it be for us who have adopted this accursed service to go back to our own houses, and there employ ourselves in pleasanter occupations, in hunting or fishing, for instance. For what squire in the world is there so poor as to not have a hack and a couple of greyhounds and a fishing rod to amuse himself with in his own village?" "I am not in want for any of those things," said Sancho. "To be sure I have no hack, but I have an ass that is worth my master's horse twice over. God send me a bad Easter. And that the next one I am to see if I would swap, even if I got 4 bushels of barley to boot. You will laugh at the value I put on my dapple, for dapple is the color of my beast. As to greyhounds, I can't want for them, for there are enough and to spare in my town, and moreover, there is more pleasure in sport when it is at other people's expense." "In truth and earnest, Sir Squire," said he of the grove, "I have made up my mind and determined to have done with these drunken vagaries of these nights, and go back to my village, and bring up my children, for I have 3, like 3 oriental pearls." "I have 2, said Sancho, "that might be presented before the Pope himself, especially a girl whom I am breeding up for a countess, please God, though in spite of her mother." "And how old is this lady that is being bred up as a countess?" asked he of the grove. 15 years, a couple of years more or less," answered Sancho, "but she is as tall as a lance, and as fresh as an April morning, and as strong as a porter." "Those are gifts to fit her to be not only a countess, but a nymph of the green wood," said he of the grove. "Horse and strumpet, what pith the rogue must have." To which Sancho made answer, somewhat sulkily, "She is no strumpet, nor was her mother, nor will either of them be, please God, where I live. Speak more civilly, for one bred up among knights errant, who are courtesy itself, your words don't seem to me to be very becoming." "Oh, how little you know about compliments, Sir Squire," returned he of the grove. "What, don't you know that when a horseman delivers a good lance thrust at the bull in the plaza, or when anyone does anything very well, the people are wont to say, 'Ha! Horse and rip, how well he has done it!' and that what seems to be abuse in the expression is high praise. Disown sons and daughters, Signor, who don't do what deserves the compliment of this sort should be paid to their parents. I do disown them, replied Sancho, and in this way, and by the same reasoning, you might call me and my children and my wife all the strumpets in the world, for all they do and say is of a kind that is in the highest degree deserves the same praise. And to see them again, I pray God deliver me from mortal sin, or what comes to the same thing, to deliver me from this perilous calling of squire into which I have fallen a second time, decayed and beguiled by a purse with 100 ducats that I found one day in the heart of the Sierra Morena. And the devil is always putting a bag full of doubloons before my eyes, here, there, everywhere, until I fancy at every stop I am putting my hand on it and hugging it and carrying it home with me and making investments and getting interest and living like a prince. And so long as I think of this, I make light of all the hardships I endure with this simpleton of a master of mine, who, I well know, is more of a madman than a knight. There's why they say that covetousness bursts the bag, said he of the Grove. But if you come to talk of that sort, there is not a greater one in the world than my master, for he is one of those whom they say the cares of others kills the ass. For in order that another knight may recover the senses he has lost, he makes a madman of himself and goes looking for what, when found, may, for all I know, fly in his own face. And is he in love, perchance? Asked Sancho. He is, said of the Grove, with one Casildea de Vandalia, the rawest and best roasted lady the whole world could produce. But that rawness is not the only foot he limps on, for he has greater schemes rumbling in his bowels, as will be seen before many hours are over. There's no road so smooth, but it has some hole or hindrance in it, said Sancho. In other houses they cook beans, but in mine it's by the potful. Madness will have more followers and hangers-on than sound sense. But if there be any if there be any truth in the common saying that to have companions in trouble gives some relief, I may take consolation from you, inasmuch as you serve a master as crazy as mine own. Crazy, but valiant, replied he of the Grove, and more roguish than crazy or valiant. Mine is not that, said Sancho. I mean he has nothing of the rogue in him. On the contrary, he has the soul of a pitcher. He has no thought of doing harm to anyone, only good to all, nor has he any malice whatever in him. A child might persuade him that he is knight at noonday. And for the simplicity, I love him at the core of my heart, and can't bring myself to leave him. Let him do ever so foolish things. For all that, brother and signor, said he of the Grove, if the blind lead the blind, both are in danger of falling into the pit. It is better for us to beat a quiet retreat and get back to our own quarters, for those who seek adventure don't always find good ones. Sancho kept spitting from time to time, and his spittle seemed somewhat ropey and dry, observing which the compassionate squire of the Grove said, It seems to me that with all this talk of ours, our tongues are sticking to the roofs of our mouths. But I have a pretty good loosener hanging from the saddle-bow of my horse, and getting up he came back the next minute with a large bota of wine and a pastry half a yard across, and this is no exaggeration, for it was made of a house rabbit so big that Sancho, as he handled it, took it to be made of a goat, and not to say a kid, and looking at it he said, And do you carry this with you, signor? Why, what are you thinking about? Said the other. Do you think me for some paltry squire? I carry a better larder in my horse's croup than a general takes with him when he goes on a march. Sancho ate without requiring to be pressed, and in the dark bolted mouthfuls like the knots on a tether. And said he, You are a proper trusty squire, one of the right sort, sumptuous and grand, as this banquet shows, which, if it has not come here by magic art, at any rate has the look of it, not like me, unlucky beggar, which that have nothing more in my alforjas than a scrap of cheese, so hard that one might brain a giant with it, and to keep it company a few dozen carobs and many more filberts and walnuts, thanks to the austerity of my master, and the idea he has and the rule he follows, the knights errant must not live or sustain themselves on anything except dried fruits and the herbs of the field. Oh, by my faith, brother, said he of the grove, my stomach is not made for thistles or wild pears or roots of the woods. Let our masters do as they like with their chivalry notions and laws, and eat what those enjoin. I carry my prog basket and this Boda hanging to the saddle bow, whatever they may say, and it is such an object of worship with me, and I love it so, that there is hardly a moment but I am kissing and embracing it over and over again. And so saying, he thrust it into Sancho's hands, who, raising it aloft, pointed to his mouth and gazed at the stars for a quarter of an hour, and when he had done drinking, he let his head fall to one side, and giving a deep sigh, exclaimed, "Ah, horse and rogue, how Catholic it is!" "There, you see," said he of the grove, hearing Sancho's exclamation, "how you have called this wine whoreson by way of praise." "Well," said Sancho, "I own it, and I grant it no dishonor to call anyone whoreson when it is to be understood as praise. But tell me, senor, by what you love best, is this Ciudad Real wine? Ciudad Real? Ciudad Real. I'm not entirely sure." "Oh, rare wine taster," said he of the grove. "Nowhere else indeed does it come from, and it has some years' age too." "Leave me alone for that," said Sancho. "Never fear, but I'll hit upon the place it came from somehow. And would you say, Sir Squire, to have my to my having such a great natural instinct in judging wines that you have only to let me smell one, and I can tell positively its country, its kind, its flavor and soundness, the changes it will undergo, and everything that appertains to a wine? But it is no wonder, for I have had in my family on my father's side the two best wine tasters that have been known in all La Mancha for many a long year, and to prove it, I'll tell you now a thing that happened to them. They gave the two of them some wine out of a cask to try, asking their opinion as to the condition, quality, goodness, or badness of the wine. One of them tried it with the tip of his tongue, and the other did no more than bring it to his nose. The first said the wine had a flavor of iron, the second said it had a strong flavor of cordovan. The owner said the cask was clean, and that nothing had been added to the wine, from which it could have got a flavor of iron or leather, of either iron or leather. Nevertheless, these two great wine tasters held to what they said. Time went by, and the wine was sold, and when it came time to clean out the cask, they found in it a small key hanging to the thong of cordovan. See now if one who comes of the same stock has not a right to give his opinion in such like cases. Therefore, I say, said he of the grove, let us give up in going in quest of adventures, and as we have loaves, let us not go looking for cakes, but return to our cribs, and God will find us there if it be his will. Until my master reaches Saragossa, said Sancho, I'll remain in his service. After that, we'll see. The end of it was that the two squires talked so much and drank so much that that sleep had to tie their tongues and moderate their thirst, for to quench it was impossible. And so the pair of them fell asleep, clinging to the now nearly empty bota, and with half-chewed morsels in their mouths, and there we will leave them for the present, to relate what passed between the Knight of the Grove and him of the rueful countenance. Alright, hold on. Let me, quite taken by a bit of lethargy. Let me go maybe grab a snack real quick. I'm gonna go, I'll set this to intermission. I'll be back in like, sorry. I'll be back in like 7 minutes, we'll say. So, don't touch that dial. Or do. I can't stop you.
Go get some snacks. Perhaps a carbonated soda.
I'm back. I have returned. I've at least got a little bit more juice on me. Might actually do another quick stretch. Sure. But yeah. That does remind me, I need to go and pester my, sister. Yeah, she's in university right about now. And I'm trying to see if she can find me, because a member of her cohort, or two maybe, are native Chinese, and so I was curious if maybe they'd have some insight into the best translation of Dream of the Red Chamber, because that'll be next on my list, hopefully. You know, as soon as I actually finish Don Quixote. But anyway, now that I've gotten my a little stretch at least. Chapter 14, wherein is continued the adventure of the Knight of the Grove. Among the things that passed between Don Quixote and the Knight of the Wood, the history tells us he of the Grove said to Don Quixote, "In fine, Sir Knight, I would have you know that my destiny, or more properly speaking, my choice, led me to fall in love with the peerless Casildea de Vandalia, and I call her peerless because she has no peer, whether it be in bodily stature or in the supremacy of rank and beauty. This same Casildea, then, that I speak, or Casildea? Casildea? I think so. Then that I speak of, has requited my honorable passion and gentle aspirations by compelling me, as his stepmother did Hercules, to engage in many perils of various sorts, at the end of each promising me that, with the end of the next, the object of my hopes should be attained. By my labors have gone on increasing link by link until they are past counting, nor do I know what will be the last one that is to be the beginning of the accomplishment of my chaste desires. On one occasion she bade me go and challenge the famous giantess of Seville, La Giralda by name, who is as mighty and strong as if made of brass, and though never stirring from one spot, is the most restless and changeable woman in the world. I came, I saw, I conquered, and I made her stay quiet and behave herself, for nothing but north winds blew for more than a week. Another time I was ordered to lift those ancient stones, the mighty bulls of Quixote, an enterprise that might more fitly be entrusted to porters than to knights. Again she bade me fling myself into the cavern of Cabra, an unparalleled and awful peril, and bring her a minute account of all that is concealed in those gloomy depths. I stopped the motion of the Giralda, I lifted the bulls of Guisando, I flung myself into the cavern, and brought to light the secrets of its abyss, and my hopes are as dead can be, and her scorn and her commands as lively as ever. To be brief, last of all, she has commanded me to go through all the provinces of Spain, and compel all the knights errant wandering therein to confess that she surpasses all women alive today in beauty, and that I am the most valiant and the most deeply enamored knight on earth, in support of which claim I have already travelled over the greater part of Spain, and have there vanquished several knights who have dared to contradict me. But what I most plume and pride myself upon is having vanquished in single combat that so famous knight Don Quixote of La Mancha, and made him confess that my Casildea is more beautiful than his Dulcinea. And in this one victory I hold myself to have conquered all the knights in the world, for this Don Quixote that I speak of has vanquished them all, and I, having vanquished him, his glory, his fame, and his honor have passed and are transferred to my person, for there, the more the vanquished hath of fair renown, the greater glory gilds the victor's crown. Thus the innumerable achievements of said Don Quixote are now set down to my account, and have become mine. Don Quixote was amazed when he heard the Knight of the Grove, and was 1,000 times on the point of telling him he lied, and had the lie direct already on the tip of his tongue. But he restrained himself as well as he could, in order to force him to confess the lie with his own lips. So he said to him quietly, "As to what you say, Sir Knight, about having vanquished most of the knights of Spain, or even of the whole world, I say nothing. But that you have vanquished Don Quixote of La Mancha I consider doubtful. It may have been some other that resembled him, although there are few like him." "How? Not vanquished?" said he of the Grove. "By the heaven that is above us, I fought Don Quixote, and overcame him, and made him yield. And he is a man of tall stature, gaunt features, long, lank limbs, with hair turning grey, an aquiline nose rather hooked, and large black drooping moustaches. Huh. He does battle under the name of the Countenance, and he has for a squire a peasant called Sancho Panza. He presses the loins and rules the reins of a famous steed called Rocinante, and lastly he has for the mistress of his will a certain Dulcinea del Toboso, once upon a time called Aldonza Lorenzo, just as I call mine Casildea del Vandalia, because her name is Casilda, and she is of Andalusia. If all these tokens are not enough to vindicate the truth of what I say, here is my sword, which will compel incredulity to itself to give credence to it." "Calm yourself, Sir Knight," said Don Quixote, "and give ear to what I am about to say to you. I would have you know that this Don Quixote you speak of is the greatest friend I have in the world, so much so that I may regard him in the same light as my own person, and from the precise and clear indications you have given, I cannot think that he must be the very one you have vanquished. On the other hand, I see with my eyes and feel with my hands that it is impossible it can have been the same, unless indeed it be that as he has many enemies who are enchanters, and one in particular who is always persecuting him, someone of these may have taken his shape in order to allow himself to be vanquished, so as to defraud him of the fame that his exalted achievements as a knight have earned and acquired for him throughout the known world. And in confirmation of this, I must tell you that it is but 10 hours since these said enchanters, his enemies, transformed the shape and person of the fair Dulcinea del Toboso into a foul and mean village lass, and in the same way they must have transformed Don Quixote. And if all this does not suffice to convince you of the truth of what I say, here is Don Quixote himself, who will maintain it by arms, or on foot, or on horseback, or in any way you please." And so saying, he stood up and laid his hand on his sword, waiting to see what the Knight of the Grove would do, who in an equally calm voice said in reply, "Pledges do not distress a good payer. He who has succeeded in vanquishing you once when transformed, Sir Don Quixote, may fairly hope to subdue you in your own proper shape. But it is not becoming for knights to perform their feats of arms in the dark. Like highwaymen and bullies, let us wait till daylight, that the sun may behold our deeds, and the conditions of our combat shall be that the vanquished shall be at the victor's disposal, to do all that he may enjoin, provided the injunction be such as shall be becoming of a knight." All he may enjoin, provided the injunction be such as shall be becoming a knight. "I am more than satisfied with these terms and conditions," replied Don Quixote, and so saying they betook themselves to where their squires lay, and found them snoring, and in the same posture they were in when sleep fell upon them. They roused them up and bade them to get the horses ready, as at sunrise they were to engage in a bloody and arduous single combat, at which intelligence Sancho was aghast and thunderstruck, trembling for the safety of his master because of the mighty deeds he had heard the squire of the Grove ascribe to his. But without a word the two squires went in quest of their cattle, for by this time the 3 horses and the ass had smelt one another out, and were all together. On the way, he of the Grove said to Sancho, "You must know, brother, that it is custom with the fighting men of Andalusia, when they are godfathers in any quarter, not to stand idle with folded arms while their godsons fight. I say to remind you that while our masters are fighting, we too have to fight and knock one another to shivers." "That custom, Sir Squire," replied Sancho, "may hold good among those bullies and fighting men you talk of, but certainly not among the squires of knights errant. At least, I have never heard my master speak of any custom of the sort, and he knows all the laws of knight-errantry by heart. But granting it true that there is an express law that squires are to fight while their masters are fighting, I don't mean to obey it, but to pay the penalty that will be laid on peacefully minded squires like myself. For I am sure it cannot be more than 2 pounds of wax, and I would rather pay that, for I know it will cost me less than the lint I shall be at the expense to mend my head, which I look upon as broken and split already. There's another thing that makes it impossible for me to fight, that I have no sword, for I have never carried one in my life. I know a good remedy for that, said he of the Grove. I have here 2 linen bags of the same size. You shall take one, and I shall take the other, and we will fight at bag blows with equal arms. If that's the way, so be it with all my heart, said Sancho. Said Sancho. For that sort of battle will serve to knock the dust out of us instead of hurting us. Ah, that will not do, said the other, for we must put into the bags, to keep the wind from blowing them away, 6 nice smooth pebbles, all of the same weight, and in this way we shall be able to baste one another without doing ourselves any harm or mischief. Oh, body of my father, said Sancho, see what marten and sable and pads of carded cotton he is putting into the bags, that our heads may not be broken, and our bones beaten to jelly. And even if they are filled with tossed silk, I can tell you, Signor, I am not going to fight. Let our masters fight, that's their lookout. And let us drink and live, for time will take care to ease us of our lives, without our going to look for Phillips. Without our going to look for Phillips, so that they may be finished off before their proper time comes and they drop from ripeness. What is a Phillip? Hold on a second. Philip. Hold on, let me see here. Let's see here. Okay, as a verb, but it does say look for Phillips. Phillips? Something tending to arouse or excite, such as, I see. Jollies, I guess, would be another term for it. Still, returned he of the Grove, we must fight, if it be only for a half an hour. Oh, by no means, said Sancho. I am not going to be so discourteous and so ungrateful as to have any quarrel, be it ever so small, with one I have eaten and drunk with. Besides, who the devil could bring himself to fight in cold blood without anger or provocation? I can remedy that entirely, said he of the Grove, and in this way, before we begin our battle, I will come to your worship fair and softly, and give you 3 or 4 buffets, with which I shall stretch you at my feet and rouse your anger, though it were sleeping sounder than a dormouse. To match that plan, said Sancho, I have another that is not a whit behind it. I will take a cudgel, and before your worship come near enough to waken my anger, I will send yours so sound to sleep with wax that it will not waken unless it be in the other world, where it is known that I am not a man to let my face be handled by anyone. Let each let each look out for the arrow, though the surer way would be to let everyone's anger sleep. For nobody knows the heart of anyone, and a man may come for wool and go back shorn. God gives his blessing to peace and his curse to quarrels. If a hunted cat surrounded and hard pressed turns into a lion, God knows what I am, who am a man, may turn into, and so from this time forth I warn you, Sir Squire, that all the harm and mischief that may come of our quarrel will be put down to your account. Oh, very good, said he of the Grove. God will send the dawn, and we shall be all right. And now gay plumaged birds of all sorts began to warble in the trees, and with their varied and gladsome notes seemed to welcome and salute the fresh morn that was beginning to show the beauty of her countenance at the gates and the balconies of the east, shaking from her locks a profusion of liquid pearls in which dulcet moisture bathed. The plants, too, seemed to shed and shower down a pearly spray. The willows distilled sweet manna. The fountains laughed, the brooks babbled, the woods rejoiced, and the meadows arrayed themselves in all their glory at her coming. But hardly had the light of day made it possible to see and distinguish things, when the first object that presented itself to the eyes of Sancho Panza was the squire of the Grove's nose, which was so big that it almost overshadowed his whole body. It is in fact stated that it was of enormous size, hooked in the middle, covered with warts, and of a mulberry color like an eggplant. It hung down 2 fingers length below his mouth, and the size, the color, the warts, and the bend of it made his face so hideous that Sancho, as he looked at him, began to tremble hand and foot like a child in convulsions, and he vowed in his heart to let himself be given 200 buffets sooner than be provoked to fight that monster. Don Quixote examined his adversary, and found that he already had his helmet on and visor lowered, so he could not see his face. He observed, however, that he was a sturdily built man, but not very tall in stature. Over his armor he wore a surcoat or cassock that seemed to be made of what seemed to be the finest cloth of gold, all bespangled with glittering mirrors like little moons, which gave him an extremely gallant and splendid appearance. Above his helmet fluttered a great quantity of plumes, green, yellow, and white, and his lance, which was leaning against a tree, was very long and stout, and had a steel point more than a palm in length. Don Quixote observed all, and took note of all, and from what he saw and observed, he concluded that said knight must be a man of great strength, for he did not for all that give way to fear. Like Sancho Panza, on the contrary, with a composed and dauntless air, he said to the Knight of the Mirrors, "If, Sir Knight, your great eagerness to fight has not banished your courtesy, by it I would entreat you to raise your visor a little, in order that I may see if the comeliness of your countenance corresponds with that of your equipment. Whether you come victorious or vanquished out of this enterprise, Sir Knight," replied he of the Mirrors, "you will have more than enough time and leisure to see me. And if now I do not comply with your request, it is because it seems to me I should do a serious wrong to the fair Casildea de Vandalia in wasting time while I stopped to raise my visor before compelling you to confess what you are already aware I maintain." "Well then," said Don Quixote, "while we are mounting, you can at least tell me if I am that Don Quixote whom you said you vanquished." "To what we answer you," said he of the Mirrors, "that you are as like the very knight I vanquished as one egg is like another. But, as you say enchanters persecute you, I will not venture to say positively whether you are the said person or not." "That," said Don Quixote, "is enough to convince me that you are under deception. However, entirely to relieve you of it, let our horses be brought, and in less time than it would take you to raise your visor, if God, my lady, and my arms stand me in good stead, I shall see your face, and you shall see that I am not the vanquished Don Quixote you take me to be." With this, cutting short the colloquy, they mounted, and Don Quixote wheeled Rocinante round in order to take a proper distance to charge back upon his adversary, and he of the Mirrors did the same. But Don Quixote had not moved away 20 paces when he heard himself called by the other, and each returning halfway, he of the Mirrors said to him, "Remember, Sir Knight, that the terms of our combat are that the vanquished, as I said before, shall be at the victor's disposal." "I am aware of it already," said Don Quixote, "provided what is commanded and imposed upon the vanquished be things that do not transgress the limits of chivalry." "That is understood," replied he of the Mirrors. At this moment the extraordinary nose of the squire presented itself to Don Quixote's view, and he was no less amazed than Sancho at the sight, insomuch that he set himself down as a monster of some kind, or a human being of some new species or unearthly breed. Sancho, seeing his master retiring to run his course, did not like to be left alone with the nosy man, fearing that with one flap of that nose on his own the battle would be all over for him, and he would be left stretched on the ground either by the blow or with fright. And so he ran after his master, holding on to Rocinante's stirrup leather, and when it seemed to him time to turn about, he said, "I implore you, your worship, señor, before you turn to charge, to help me up into this cork tree, from which I will be able to witness the gallant encounter your worship is going to have with this knight, more to my taste and better than from the ground." "It seems to me rather, Sancho," said Don Quixote, "that thou wouldst mount a scaffold in order to see the bulls without danger." To tell the truth," returned Sancho, "the monstrous nose of that squire has filled me with fear and terror, and I dare not stay near him." "Why, it is," said Don Quixote, "such a one that were I not what I am, it would terrify me too. So come, I will help thee up where thou wilt." While Don Quixote waited for Sancho to mount into the cork tree, he of the mirrors took as much ground as he considered requisite, and supposing Don Quixote to have done the same, without waiting for any sound or trumpet or other signal to direct them, he wheeled his horse, which was not more agile or better looking than Rocinante, and at his top speed, which was an easy trot, he proceeded to charge his enemy. Seeing him, however, engaged in putting Sancho up, he drew rein, halted in mid-career, for which his horse was very grateful, as he was already unable to go. Don Quixote, fancying that his foe was coming down upon him flying, drove his spurs vigorously into Rocinante's lean flanks, and made him scud along in such a style that the history tells us that on this occasion only was he known to make something like running. For on all others it was a simple trot with him, and his unparalleled fury he bore down where he of the mirrors stood digging his spurs into his horse up to buttons, without being able to make him stir a finger's length from the spot where he had come to a standstill in his course. At this lucky moment and crisis, Don Quixote came upon his adversary in trouble with his horse, and embarrassed with lands which he either could not manage or had no time to lay in rest. Don Quixote, however, paid no attention to these difficulties, and brought him to the ground in spite of himself over the haunches of his horse. And so, with a heavy fall, that he lay to all appearance dead, not stirring hand or foot, the instant Sancho saw him fall, he slid down the cork tree, and made all haste to where his master was, who, dismounting from Rocinante, went and stood over him of the mirrors, and unlacing his helmet to see if he was dead, and to give him air if he should happen to be alive, he saw, who can say what he saw without filling all who hear it with astonishment, wonder, and awe? He saw, the history says, the very countenance, the very face, the very look, the very physiognomy, I don't know. The very effigy, the very image of the bachelor Samson Carrasco. As soon as he saw it, he called out in a loud voice, "Make haste here, Sancho, and behold what thou art to see, but not believe. Quick, my son, and learn what magic can do, and wizards and enchanters are capable of." Sancho came up, and when he saw the countenance of the bachelor Carrasco, he fell to crossing himself 1,000 times, and blessing himself as many more. All this time the prostrate knight showed no signs of life, and Sancho said to Don Quixote, "It is my opinion, señor, that in any case your worship would take and thrust your sword into the mouth of this one here that looks like the bachelor Samson Carrasco. Perhaps in him you will kill one of your enemies, the enchanters." "But thy advice is not bad," said Don Quixote, "for of enemies the fewer the better." And he was drawing his sword to carry into effect Sancho's counsel and suggestions, when the squire of the mirrors came up, now without the nose which had made him so hideous, and cried out in a loud voice, "Mind what you are about, Señor Don Quixote. That is your friend, the bachelor Samson Carrasco, you have at your feet, and I am his squire." "And the nose?" said Sancho, seeing him without the hideous feature he had before, to which he replied, "I have it here in my pocket." And putting his hand into his right pocket, he pulled out a masquerade nose, a varnished pasteboard of the make already described, and Sancho, examining him more closely, exclaimed in a loud voice of amazement, "Holy Mary, be good to me! Isn't it Tom Cecil, my neighbor and gossip?" "Why, to be sure I am," returned the now unnosed squire. "Tom Cecil I am, gossip and friend Sancho Panza, and I'll tell you presently the means and tricks and falsehoods by which I have been brought here. But in the meantime, beg and entreat your master not to touch, maltreat, wound, or slay the knight of the mirrors, whom he has at his feet, because beyond all dispute it is the rash and ill-advised bachelor Samson Carrasco, our fellow townsman." At this moment he of the mirrors came to himself, and Don Quixote, perceiving it, held the naked point of his sword over his face, and said to him, "You're a dead man, knight, unless you confess the peerless Dulcinea del Toboso excels your Casildea de Vandalia in beauty, and in addition to this you must promise, if you should survive this encounter and fall." to go to the city of El Toboso and present yourself before her on my behalf, that she deal with you according to her good pleasure, and if she leaves you free to do yours, you are in like manner to return and seek me out, for the trail of my mighty deeds will serve you as a guide to lead you to where I may be. And tell me what have passed between you and her, conditions which, in accordance with what we stipulated before our combat, do not transgress the just limits of knight-errantry." "I confess," said Don Quixote, "that the dirty, tattered shoe of Lady Dulcinea del Toboso is better than the ill-combed, though clean beard of Casildea, and I promise to go and in return from her presence to yours, and to give you a full and particular account of all you demand of me." "You must also confess and believe," added Don Quixote, "that the knight you vanquished was not and could not be Don Quixote of La Mancha, but someone else in his likeness, just as I confess and believe that you, though you seem to be the bachelor Samson Carrasco, are not so, but some other resembling him, whom my enemies have here put before me in his shape, in order that I may restrain and moderate the vehemence of my wrath, and make a gentle use of the glory of my victory. I confess, hold and think everything to be as you believe, hold and think it. The crippled knight, let me rise, I entreat you. If indeed the shock of my fall will allow me, for it has left me in a sorry plight enough." Don Quixote helped him to rise with the assistance of his squire, Tom Cecil, from whom Sancho never took his eyes, and to whom he put questions, the replies to which were furnished clear proof that he was really and truly Tom Cecil, as he said. But the impression made on Sancho's mind by what his master said about the enchanters having changed the face of the Knight of Mirrors into that of the bachelor Samson Carrasco would not permit him to believe what he saw with his eyes. In fine, both masters and man remained under the delusion, and down in the mouth and out of luck, he of the mirrors and his squire parted from Don Quixote and Sancho, he meaning to go look for some village where he could plaster and strap his ribs. Don Quixote and Sancho resumed their journey to Saragossa, and on it the history leaves them, in order that it may tell who the Knight of the Mirrors and his long-nosed squire were. I still think this is too good. Oh, he's got one heck of a schnoz, that guy. Alright, well, this one's gonna be Chapter 15. Wherein it is told and known who the Knight of the Mirrors and his squire were. Don Quixote went off satisfied, elated, and vainglorious in the highest degree of having won a victory over such a valiant knight as he fancied him of the mirrors to be, and one of those knightly word he expected to learn whether enchantment of his lady still continued, inasmuch as the said vanquished knight was bound, under the penalty of ceasing to be one, to return and render him an account of what took place between him and her. But Don Quixote was of one mind, he of the mirrors of another, for he just then had no thought of anything but finding some village where he could plaster himself, as been said already. The history goes on to say that when the bachelor Samson Carrasco recommended Don Quixote to resume his knight-errantry, which he had laid aside, it was in consequence of having been previously in conclave with the curate and the barber on the means to be adopted, to induce Don Quixote to stay at home in peace and quiet without worrying himself with his ill-starred adventures, at which consultation it was decided by the unanimous vote of all, and on the special advice of Carrasco, that Don Quixote should be allowed to go, as it seemed impossible to restrain him, and that Samson should sally forth to meet him as a knight-errant and do battle with him, for there would be no difficulty about a cause, and vanquish him, that being looked upon as an easy matter, that it should be agreed and settled that the vanquished was to be at the mercy of the victor. Then, Don Quixote being vanquished, the bachelor knight was to command him to return to his village and his house, and not quit it for 2 years, or until he received further orders from him. All which it was clear Don Quixote would unhesitatingly obey, rather than contravene or fail to observe the laws of chivalry, and during the period of his seclusion he might perhaps forget his folly, or there might be an opportunity of discovering some ready remedy for his madness. Carrasco undertook the task, and Tom Cecil, a gossip and neighbor of Sancho Panza's, a lively and feather-headed fellow, offered himself as his squire. Carrasco armed himself in the fashion described, and Tom Cecil, though he may not be known by his gossip, when they met, fitted on over his own natural nose the false masquerade one that has been mentioned. And so they followed the same route Don Quixote took, and almost came up with him in time to be present at the adventure of the cart of death, and finally encountered them in the grove, where all the sagacious reader had been reading about took place. And had it not been for the extraordinary fancies of Don Quixote and his conviction that his bachelor was not the bachelor, Signor Bachelor would have been incapacitated forever from taking his degree of licentiate, although now all through not finding nests where he thought to find birds. Tom Cecil, seeing how ill they had succeeded, and what a sorry end their expedition had come to, said to the bachelor, "Sure enough, Signor Samson Carrasco. We are served right. It is easy enough to plan and set about an enterprise, but it is often a difficult matter to come well out of it. Don Quixote, a madman, and we sane, he goes off laughing, safe and sound, and you are left sore and sorry. I'd like to know now which is the matter, he who is so because he cannot help it, or he who is so of his own choice." To which Samson replied, "The difference between the two sorts of madmen is that he who is so willy-nilly, that he who is so willy-nilly will be one always, while he who is of his own accord can leave off being one whenever he likes." "In that case," said Tom Cecil, "I was a madman of my own accord when I volunteered to become your squire, and of my own accord I'll leave off being one and go home." "That's your affair," returned Samson. "But to suppose that I am going home until I have given Don Quixote a thrashing is absurd, and it is not any wish that he may recover his senses that will make me hunt him out now, but a wish for the sore pain I am in that my ribs won't let me entertain more charitable thoughts." Thus discoursing, the pair proceeded until they reached a town where it was their good luck to find a bone setter, with whose help the unfortunate Samson was cured. Tom Cecil left him and went home, where he stayed behind meditating vengeance. And the history will return to him again at the proper time, so as not to omit making merry with Don Quixote now. Okay, not bad. Hang on, just need to... Ah, that's good. See if I got any more. Okay. Chapter 16 of What Befell Don Quixote with the Discreet Gentleman of La Mancha. Don Quixote pursued his journey in the high spirits, satisfaction, and self-complacency already described, fancying himself the most valorous knight-errant of the age in the world because of his late victory. All the adventures that could befall him from that time forth he regarded as already done and brought to a happy issue. He made light of enchantments and enchanters. He thought no more of the countless drubbings that had been administered to him in the course of his knight-errantry, nor of the volley of stones that had leveled half his teeth, nor the ingratitude of the galley slaves, nor the audacity of the Yanguasayans, and the shower of stakes that fell upon him. In short, he said to himself that he could discover any means, mode, or way of disenchanting his lady Dulcinea. He would not envy the highest fortune that the most fortunate errant knight of yore ever reached or could reach. He was going along entirely absorbed in these fancies when Sancho said to him, "Isn't it odd, Signor, that I still have before my eyes the monstrous, enormous nose of my gossip, Tom Cecil?" "And dost thou then believe, Sancho," said Don Quixote, "that the Knight of the Mirrors was the bachelor Carrasco, and his squire, Tom Cecil, the gossip?" "I don't know what to say," replied Sancho. "All that I know is that the tokens he gave me about my own house, wife, and children nobody else but himself could have given me, and the face, once the nose was off, was the very face of Tom Cecil, as I have seen it many a time in my town and next door to my own house, and the sound of the voice was just the same." "Well, let us reason the matter, Sancho," said Don Quixote. "Come now, by what process of thinking can it be supposed that the bachelor Samson Carrasco would come as a knight-errant in arms offensive and defensive to fight with me? Have I ever been by any chance his enemy? Have I ever given him any occasion to owe me a grudge? Am I his rival, or does he profess arms that he should envy the fame I have acquired in them? Well, but what are we to say, Senor, returned Sancho, about the knight, whoever he is, being so like the bachelor Carrasco, and his squire so like my gossip, Tom Cecil? And if that be enchantment, as your worship says, was there no other pair in the world for them to take the likeness of? It is all, said Don Quixote, a scheme, a plot of the malignant magicians that persecute me, who, foreseeing that I was to be victorious in the conflict, arranged the vanquished knight should display the countenance of my friend the bachelor, in order that the friendship I bear him should interpose to stay the edge of my sword and the might of my arm, and temper the just wrath of my heart. It is that he who sought to take my life by fraud and falsehood should save his own. And to prove it, thou knowest already, Sancho, by experience which cannot lie or deceive, how easy it is for enchanters to change one countenance to another, turning fair into foul and foul into fair. For it is not 2 days since thou sawest with thine own eyes the beauty and elegance of the peerless Dulcinea in all its perfection and natural harmony, while I saw her in the repulsive and mean form of a coarse country wench, with cataracts in her eyes and a foul smell in her mouth. And when the perverse enchanter ventured to effect so wicked a transformation, it is no wonder if he effected that of Samson Carrasco and thy gossip in order to snatch the glory of victory out of my grasp. For all that, however, I console myself because, after all, in whatever shape he may have been, I have been victorious over my enemy. Oh, God knows what's the truth of it all, said Sancho, and knowing as he did that the transformation of Dulcinea had been a device and imposition of his own, his master's illusions were not satisfactory to him. But he did not like to reply, lest he should say something that might disclose his trickery. As they were engaged in this conversation, they were overtaken by a man who was following the same road behind them, mounted on a very handsome flea-bitten mare, and dressed in a gaban of fine green cloth, with tawny velvet facings, and a montera of the same velvet. The trappings of the mare were of the field and Ginetta fashion, and of mulberry color and green. He carried a Moorish cutlass hanging from a broad green and gold baldric. The buskins were of the same make as the baldric. The spurs were not gilt, but lacquered green, and so brightly polished, matching as they did the rest of his apparel, they looked better than if they had been made of pure gold. When the traveler came up with them, he saluted them courteously, and spurring his mare, was passing them without stopping. But Don Quixote called out to him, "Oh, gallant sir, if it be your worship is going our road, and has no occasion for speed, it would pleasure me if you were to join company. In truth," replied he on the mare, "I would not pass you so hastily, but for fear that the horse might restive in the company of my mare. Might turn restive, excuse me. Hold on, let's see here. Turn restive. Stubbornly resisting control, balky, marked by impatience or uneasiness. Ah, yes, as is fate of horses. Anyway, where was I? "You may safely hold in your mare, senor," said Sancho in reply of this, "for our horse is the most virtuous and well-behaved horse in the world. He never does anything wrong on such occasions, and the only time he misbehaved, my master and I suffered for it sevenfold. I say again, your worship may pull up if you like, for if she was offered to him between two plates, the horse would not hanker after her." The traveler drew rein, amazed at the trim and features of Don Quixote, who rode without his helmet, while Sancho carried like a valise in front of Dapple's pack saddle. And if the man in green examined Don Quixote closely, still more closely did Don Quixote examine the man in green, who struck him as being a man of intelligence. In appearance he was about 50 years of age, but with but few gray hairs, an aquiline cast of features, and an expression between grave and gay, and his dress and accoutrements showed him to be a man of good condition. What he in green thought of Don Quixote of La Mancha was that a man of that sort and shape he had never yet seen. He marveled at the length of his hair, his lofty stature, the lankness and sallowness of his countenance, his armor, his bearing, and his gravity, a figure and picture such as had not been seen in those regions for many a long day. Don Quixote saw very plainly the attention with which the traveler was regarding him, and read his curiosity and his astonishment, and courteous as he was, and ready to please everybody, before the other could ask him any question, he anticipated him by saying, "The appearance I present to your worship being so strange and so out of the common, I should not be surprised if it filled you with wonder. But you will cease to wonder when I tell you, as I do, that I am one of those knights who, as people say, go seeking adventures. I have left my home, I have mortgaged my estate, I have given up my comforts, and committed myself to the arms of fortune, to bear me whithersoever she may please. My desire was to bring to life..." Sorry. My desire was to bring to life again knight-errantry, now dead, and for some past, stumbling here, falling there, now coming down headlong, now raising myself up again. I have carried out a great portion of my design, succoring widows, protecting maidens, and giving aid to wives, orphans, and minors, the proper and natural duty of knights-errant, and therefore, because of my valiant and Christian achievements, I have already found worthy to make my way in print to well-nigh all, or most of the nations of earth. 30,000 volumes of my history have been printed, and it is on the high road to be printed 30,000 thousands of times. If heaven does not put a stop to it. In short, to sum up all in a few words, or in a single one, I may tell you I am Don Quixote of La Mancha, otherwise called the Knight of the Rueful Countenance, for, though self-praise is degrading, I must perforce sound my own sometimes, that is to say, when there is no one at hand to do it for me. So that, gentle sir, neither this horse, nor this lance, nor this shield, nor this squire, nor all these arms put together, nor the sallowness of my countenance, nor my gaunt leanness will henceforth astonish you, now that you know who I am, and what profession I follow." With these words, Don Quixote held his peace, and from the time he took to answer, the man in green seemed to be at a loss for a reply. After a long pause, however, he said to him, "You were right when you saw curiosity in my amazement, Sir Knight, but you have not succeeded in removing the astonishment I feel at seeing you, for, although you say, Signor, that knowing who you are ought to remove it, it has not done so. On the contrary, now that I know, I am left more amazed and astonished than before. What, is it possible that there are knights-errant in the world in these days, and histories of real chivalry printed? I cannot realize the fact that there can be anyone on earth nowadays who aids widows, or protects maidens, or defends wives, or succors orphans. Nor should I believe it had I not seen it in your worship with my own eyes. Blessed be heaven! For by means of this history of your noble and genuine chivalrous deeds, which you say has been printed, the countless stories of fictitious knights-errant with which the world is filled, so much to the injury of morality and the prejudice and discredit of good histories, will have been driven into oblivion." "There is a good deal to be said on that point," said Don Quixote, "as to whether the histories of the knights-errant are fiction or not. Why, is there anyone who doubts that those histories are false?" said the man in green. "I doubt it," said Don Quixote. "But never mind that just now. If our journey lasts long enough, I trust in God I shall show your worship that you do wrong in going with the stream of those who regard it as a matter of certainty that they are not true." From this last observation Don Quixote's, the traveler began to have a suspicion that he was some crazy being, and was waiting for him to confirm it by something further, but before they could turn to any new subject, Don Quixote begged him to tell him who he was, since he himself had rendered account of his station in life. To this he in the green gaban replied, "I, Sir Knight of the Rueful Countenance, am a gentleman by birth, native of the village where, please God, we are going to dine today. I am more than fairly well off, and my name is Don Diego de Miranda. I pass my life with my wife, children, and friends. My pursuits are hunting and fishing. But I keep neither hawks nor greyhounds, nothing but a tame partridge and a bold ferret or two. I have 6 dozen or so of books, some in our mother tongue, some Latin, some of them history, others devotional. Those of chivalry have not as yet crossed the threshold of my door. I am more given to turning over the profane than the devotional. so long as they are books of honest entertainment that charm by their style and attract an interest by the invention they display. Though these there are very few in Spain. Sometimes I dine with my neighbors and my friends, and often invite them. My entertainments are neat and well served without stint of anything. I have no taste for tattle, nor do I allow tattling in my presence. I pry not into my neighbors' lives, nor have I lynx eyes for what others do. I hear mass every day. I share my substance with the poor, making no display of good works, lest I let hypocrisy and vainglory, those enemies that subtly take possession of the most watchful heart, find an entrance into mine. I strive to make peace between those whom I know to be at variance. I am the devoted servant of Our Lady, and my trust is ever in the infinite mercy of God our Lord. Sancho listened with the greatest attention to the account of the gentleman's life and occupation, and thinking it a good and holy life, and that he led it ought to work miracles, he threw himself off to Apple, and running in haste seized his right stirrup and kisses his foot again and again with a devout heart and almost with tears. Seeing this, the gentleman asked him, "What are you about, brother? What are these kisses for?" "Oh, let me kiss," said Sancho, "for I think your worship is the first saint in the saddle I ever saw all the days of my life." "Oh, I am no saint," replied the gentleman, "but a great sinner. But you are, brother, for you must be a good fellow, as your simplicity shows." Sancho went back and regained his pack saddle, having extracted a laugh from his master's profound melancholy, and excited fresh amazement in Don Diego. Don Quixote then asked him how many children he had, and observed that one of the things wherein the ancient philosophers, who were without the true knowledge of God, placed the summum bonum, was in the gifts of nature, in those of fortune, in having many friends, and many and good children. "I, Señor Don Quixote," answered the gentleman, "have one son, without whom perhaps I should count myself happier than I am, not because he is a bad son, but because he is not so good as I could wish. He is 18 years of age. He has been for 6 at Salamanca, studying Latin and Greek, and when I wished him to turn to the study of other sciences, I found him so wrapped up in that poetry, if that can be called a science, that there is no getting him to take kindly to the law, which I wished him to study, or to theology, the queen of them all. I would like him to be an honor to his family, as we live in days where our kings liberally reward learning that is virtuous and worthy. For learning without virtue is a pearl on a dunghill. He spends the whole day in settling whether Homer expressed himself correctly or not in such and such a line of the Iliad, whether Martial was indecent or not in such and such an epigram, whether such and such lines of Virgil are to be understood in this way or in that. In short, all his talk is of the works of these poets, and those of Horace, Persius, Juvenal, and Tibullus. For of the moderns in our own language he makes no great account. But with all his seeming indifference to Spanish poetry, just now his thoughts are absorbed in making a gloss on 4 lines that have been sent him from Salamanca, which I suspect are for some poetical tournament. To all this Don Quixote said in reply, "Children, señor, are portions of their parents' bowels, and therefore, be they good or bad, are to be loved as we love the souls that give us life. It is for the parents to guide them from infancy in the ways of virtue, propriety, and worthy Christian conduct, so that when they grow up they may be of the staff of their parents' old age, and the glory of their posterity, and to force them to study this or that science I do not think wise, though it may be no harm to persuade them, and when there is no need to study for the sake of pane lucrando. It is the student's good fortune that heaven has given him parents who provide him with it. It would be my advice to let him peruse whatever science that may see him most inclined to, and though that of poetry is less useful than pleasurable, it is not one of those that bring discredit upon the possessor. Poetry, gentle sir, as I take it, like a tender young maiden of supreme beauty, to array, bedeck, and adorn whom is the task of several other maidens, who are all the rest of the sciences, she must avail herself of the help of all, and all derive their luster from hers. But this maiden will not bear to be handled, nor dragged through the streets, nor exposed either at the corners of the marketplaces or in the closets of palaces. She is the product of an alchemy of such virtue that he who is able to practice it will turn her into pure gold of inestimable worth. He that possesses her must keep her within bounds, not permitting her to break out of the ribald satires or soulless sonnets. She must on no account be offered for sale, unless indeed it be in heroic poems, moving tragedies, or sprightly and ingenious comedies. She must not be touched by the buffoons, nor by the ignorant vulgar, incapable of comprehending or appreciating her hidden treasures. And do not suppose, Signor, that I apply the term vulgar here merely to plebeians and the lower orders, but for everyone who is ignorant, be he lord or prince, may and should be included among the vulgar. He then who shall embrace and cultivate poetry under the conditions I have named shall become famous, and his name honored throughout all the civilized nations of the earth. And with regard to what you say, Signor, of your son having no great opinion of Spanish poetry, I am inclined to think that he is not quite right there. For this reason, the great poet Homer did not write in Latin because he was a Greek, nor did Virgil write in Greek because he was a Latin. In short, all the ancient poets wrote in the language they imbibed with their mother's milk, and never went in quest of foreign ones to express their sublime conceptions. And that being so, the usage should, in justice, extend to all nations, and the German poet should not be undervalued because he writes in his own language, nor the Castilian, nor even the Biscayan, for writing in his. But your son, Signor, I suspect, is not prejudiced against Spanish poetry, but against those poets who are mere Spanish verse writers, without any knowledge of other languages or sciences to adorn and give life and vigor to their natural inspiration. And yet even in this he may be wrong, for according to a true belief, a poet is born one, that is to say, the poet by nature comes forth a poet from his mother's womb, and following the bent that heaven has bestowed upon him, and without aid of study or art, he produces things that show how truly he spoke, who said, et Deus in nobis, etc. At the same time, I say that the poet by nature who calls in art to his aid will be a far better poet, and will surpass him who tries to be one relying upon his knowledge of art alone. The reason is that art does not surpass nature, but only brings it to perfection. And thus, nature combined with art, and art with nature... I've lost my train of thought, hold on. Will produce a perfect poet. To bring my argument to a close, I would say then, gentle sir, let your son go on as his star leads him, for being so studious as he seems to be, and having already successfully surmounted the first steps of the sciences, which is that of the languages. With their help, he will by his own exertions reach the summit of polite literature, which so well becomes an independent gentleman, and adorns, honors, and distinguishes him, as well as the mitre does the bishop, or the gown the learned counselor. If your son writes satire reflecting on the honor of others, chide and correct him, and tear them up. But if he compose discourses in which he rebukes vice in others, in general, in the style of Horace, and with elegance like his, commend him, for it is legitimate for a poet to write against envy and lash... Hi! What do you want? I know, I'm almost finished. My throat's getting a little sore. Hi! Yes. Against envy and lash the envious in his verse, and other vices too, provided he does not single out individuals. There are, however, poets, for the sake of saying something spiteful, would run the risk of being banished to the coast of Pontus. If the poet be pure in his morals, he will be pure in his verses too. The pen is the tongue of the mind, and as the thought engendered there, so will be the things that it writes down. And when kings and princes observe this marvelous science of poetry in wise, virtuous, and thoughtful subjects, they honor, value, exalt them, and even crown them with the leaves of that tree which the thunderbolt strikes not, as if to show that they whose brows are honored and adorned with such a crown are not to be assailed by anyone. He of the green gaban was filled with astonishment at Don Quixote's argument, so much so that he began to abandon the notion that he had taken up about his being crazy, But in the middle of the discourse, it being not very much to his taste, Sancho had turned aside out of the road to beg a little milk from some shepherds who were milking their ewes hard by, and just as the gentleman, highly pleased, was about to renew the conversation, Don Quixote, raising his head, perceived a cart covered with royal flags coming along the road they were traveling, and persuaded that this must be some new adventure. He called aloud to Sancho to come and bring him his helmet. Sancho, hearing himself called, quitted the shepherds, and prodding Dapple vigorously, came up to his master, to whom there fell a terrific and desperate adventure. This one's quite a long chapter. But this one is, you know what? We'll at least get to chapter 18. Yeah. Chapter 17. Wherein is shown the furthest and highest point which the unexampled courage of Don Quixote reached or could reach, together with the happily achieved adventure of the lions. The history tells that when Don Quixote called out to Sancho to bring him his helmet, Sancho was buying some curds the shepherds agreed to sell to him, and flurried by the great haste his master was in did not know what to do with them, or what to carry them in, so not to lose them, for he had already paid for them, he thought it best to throw them into his master's helmet, and acting on this bright idea, he went to see what his master wanted with him. He, as he approached, exclaimed to him, "Give me my helmet, my friend, for I know little of adventures, or what I observe yonder is one that will, and does call upon me to arm myself." He of the green gaban, on hearing this, looked in all directions, but could perceive nothing except a cart coming towards them with 2 or 3 small flags, which led him to conclude it must be carrying treasure of the king's, and he said so to Don Quixote. He, however, would not believe him, always being persuaded and convinced that all that happened to him must be adventure, and still more adventures. So he replied to the gentleman, "He who is prepared has his battle half fought. Nothing is lost by preparing myself, for I know by experience that I have enemies, visible and invisible, and I know not when or where, or at what moment, or in what shapes they will attack me." And turning to Sancho, he called for his helmet, and Sancho, as he had no time to take out the curds, had to give it just as it was. Don Quixote took it, and, without perceiving what was in it, thrust it down in hot haste over his head, but as the curds were pressed and squeezed, the whey began to run all over his face and beard, whereat he was so startled he cried out to Sancho, "Sancho, what's this? I think my head is softening, or my brains are melting, or I am sweating from head to foot. If I am sweating, it is not indeed from fear, for I am convinced beyond a doubt that the adventure which is about to befall me is a terrible one. Give me something to wipe myself with, if thou hast it, for this profuse sweat is blinding me." Sancho held his tongue and gave him a cloth, and gave thanks to God at the same time that his master had not found out what was the matter. Don Quixote then wiped himself and took off his helmet to see what it was that made his head feel so cool, and seeing all that white mash inside his helmet, he put it all to his nose, and as soon as he smelt it, he exclaimed, "Oh, by the life of my lady Dulcinea del Toboso, but it is curds thou hast put here, thou treacherous, impudent, ill-mannered squire." Squire. Whatever. To which, with great composure and pretended innocence, Sancho replied, "If they are curds, let me have them, your worship, and I'll eat them. But let the devil eat them, for it must have been he who put them there. I dare to dirty your helmet. You would have guessed the offenders finally." "Faith, sir, by the light God gives me, it seems I must have enchanters too, that persecute me as a creature and limb of your worship, and that they must have put that nastiness there in order to provoke your patience to anger, and make you baste my ribs as you are wont to do. Well, this time indeed they have missed their aim, for I trust to my master's good sense to see that I have got no curds or milk or anything of that sort, and that if I had it, it is in my stomach. I would put in and not in the helmet." "Maybe so," said Don Quixote, as all this the gentleman was observing, and with astonishment, more especially after having wiped himself clean, his head, face, beard, and helmet, Don Quixote put on, and settling himself firmly in his stirrups, easing his sword in the scabbard, and grasping his lance, he cried, "Now come who will, here am I, ready to try conclusions with Satan himself in person." By this time, the cart with the flags had come up, unattended by anyone except the carter on a mule, and a man sitting in front. Don Quixote planted himself before it, and said, "Whither are you going, brothers? What cart is this? What have you got in it? What flags are those?" To this the carter replied, "The cart is mine. What is in it is a pair of wild caged lions, which the governor of Iran is sending to court as a present to his majesty, and the flags are our lord the king's, to show that these are his property." "And are the lions large?" said Don Quixote. "So large," replied the man who sat at the door of the cart, "the larger, or as large, has never crossed from Africa to Spain. I am the keeper. I have brought over others, but never any like these. They are male and female, the male in that first cage, and the female in the one behind, and they are hungry now, for they have eaten nothing today, so let your worship stand aside, for we must make haste to the palace where we are to feed them." Hereupon, smiling slightly, Don Quixote exclaimed, "Lion whelps to me whelps of lions, and at such a time. Then, by God, these gentlemen who send them here shall see if I am a man to be frightened by lions. Get down, my good fellow, and if you are keeper, and as you are the keeper, open the cages and turn me out those beasts, and in the midst of this plain I will let them know who Don Quixote of La Mancha is, in spite and in the teeth of the enchanters who send them to me." So, said the gentleman to himself at this, "our worthy knight has shown what sort he is. The curds no doubt have softened his skull and brought his brains to a head." At this instant Sancho came up to him, saying, "Señor, for God's sake, do something to keep my master Don Quixote from tackling those lions, for if he does, they'll tear us all to pieces here." "Your master is so mad," asked the gentleman, "that you believe and are afraid he will engage such fierce animals?" "He is not mad, but he is venturesome." "I will prevent it," said the gentleman, and going over to Don Quixote, who was insisting upon the keeper opening the cages, he said to him, "Sir Knight, knights errant should attempt adventures where encouraged the hope of a successful issue, not those which entirely withhold it, for valor that trenches upon temerity savors rather of madness than of courage. Moreover, these lions do not come to oppose you, nor do they dream of such a thing. They are going as presents to his majesty, and it will not be right to stop them or delay their journey." "Oh, gentle sir," replied Don Quixote, "you go and mind your tame partridge and your bold ferret, and leave everyone to manage his own business. This is mine, and I know whether these gentlemen the lions come to me or not." And then, turning to the keeper, he exclaimed, "By all that's good, sir scoundrel, if you don't open these cages this very instant, I'll pin you to the cart with this lance." The carter, seeing the determination of this apparition in armor, said to him, "Please, your worship, for charity's sake, señor, let me unyoke my mules and place myself in safety along with them before the lions are turned out. For if they kill them, on me I am ruined for life, for all I possess is this cart and mules." "Oh, man of little faith," replied Don Quixote, "get down and unyoke, and you will see that you are exerting yourself for nothing, and that you might have spared yourself the trouble." The carter got down, and with all speed unyoked the mules, and the keeper called out at the top of his voice, "I call all here to witness that against my will and under compulsion I opened the cages and let the lions loose, and that I warn this gentleman that he will be accountable for all the harm and mischief which these beasts may do, and for my salary and dues as well. You, gentlemen, place yourself in safety before I open, for I know they will do me no harm." Once more the gentleman strove to persuade Don Quixote not to do such a mad thing, as it was tempting God to engage in such a piece of folly. To this Don Quixote replied that he knew that he was what he was about. The gentleman in return retreated him to reflect, for he knew he was under a delusion. "Well, señor," answered Don Quixote. All right, hold on, give me just a second. What do you want? Anyway. Well, Senor, answered Don Quixote, if you do not like to be a spectator of this tragedy, as is your opinion it will be, spur your flea-bitten mare and place yourself in safety. Ignis Sancho, with tears in his eyes, entreated him to give up an enterprise compared with which the one of the windmills and the awful one of the fulling mills, and in fact, all the feats he had attempted in the whole course of his life were cakes and fancy bread. Look ye, senor, said Sancho, there's no enchantment here, nor anything of the sort, for between the bars and chinks of the cage I have seen the paws of a real lion, and judging by that I reckon the lion such a paw could belong to a and judging by that I reckon the lion such a paw could belong to must be bigger than a mountain. Fear at any rate, replied Don Quixote, will make him look bigger to thee than half the world. Retire, Sancho, and leave me be, and if I die here, thou knowest our old compact, that would repair to Dulcinea, I say no more. To these he added some further words. Oh, hello!
No smoking in the parlor.
Thank you very much to one Braggy 3030. I do sincerely appreciate it. Well, I mean, as you can see, we're here reading good old Don Quixote. Where was I? I've completely lost my, yes. To these he added some further words that banished all hope of his giving up his insane project. He of the green gaban would have offered resistance, but he found himself ill-matched as to arms, and did not think it prudent to come to blows with a madman, for such Don Quixote now showed himself to be in every respect. And the latter, renewing his commands to the keeper and repeating his threats, gave warning to the gentleman to spur his mare, Sancho his dapple, and the carter his mules, all striving to get away from the cart as far as they could before the lions broke loose. Sancho was weeping over his master's death, for all this time he firmly believed what was in store for him was the claws of the lions, and he cursed his fate and called it an unlucky hour that he thought of taking service with him again. But with all his tears and lamentations, he did not forget to thrash Dapple so as to put a good space between himself and the cart. The keeper, seeing that the fugitives were now some distance off, once more entreated and warned him as before, but he replied that he heard him, and that he need not trouble himself with any further warnings or entreaties, as they would be fruitless, and bade him make haste. During the delay that occurred while the keeper was opening the first cage, Don Quixote was considering whether it would not be well to do battle on foot instead of on horseback, and finally resolved to fight on foot, fearing that Rocinante might take fright at the sight of the lions, and therefore he sprang off his horse, flung his lance aside, braced his buckler on his arm, and drawing his sword advanced slowly with marvelous intrepidity and resolute courage, to plant himself in front of the cart, commending himself with all his heart to God and to his lady Dulcinea. It is observed that, on coming to this passage, the author of this veracious history breaks out into exclamations. "Oh, doughty Don Quixote, high-mettled, past extolling, mirror wherein all the heroes of the world may see themselves, second modern Don Manuel de Leon, once the glory and honor of Spanish knighthood. In what words shall I describe this dread exploit? By what language shall I make it credible to ages to come? What eulogies are there unmeet for thee? Though they be hyperboles piled on hyperboles, on foot, alone, undaunted, high-souled, with but a simple word, and with no trenchant blade of the perillo, and that no trenchant blade of the perillo brand, a shield, but no bright polished steel one, there stoodest thou, biding and awaiting the two fiercest lions that Africa's forest ever bred. Thy own deeds be thy praise, valiant Manchegan, and here I leave them as they stand, wanting the word wanting the words wherewith to glorify them." Here the author's outburst came to an end, and he proceeded to take up the thread of his story, saying that the keeper, seeing that Don Quixote had taken up his position, and that it was impossible for him to avoid letting out the mail without incurring the enmity of the fiery and daring knight, flung open the doors of the first cage containing, as has been said, the lion, which was now seen to be of enormous size and grim and hideous mien. The first thing he did was to turn around in the cage in which he lay and protrude his claws and stretch himself thoroughly. Next he opened his mouth and yawned very leisurely, and near 2 palms' length of tongue that he had thrust forth, he licked out the dust of his eyes and washed his face. Having done this, he put his head out of the cage and looked around with eyes like glowing coals, a spectacle in demeanor to strike terror into temerity itself. Don Quixote merely observed him steadily, longing for him to leap from the cart and come to close quarters with him, when he hoped to hew him in pieces. And so did his unparalleled madness go, but the noble lion, more courteous than arrogant, not troubling himself with silly bravado, after having looked around, as has been said, turned about and presented his hindquarters to Don Quixote, and very coolly and tranquilly lay down again in the cage. Seeing this, Don Quixote ordered the keeper to take a stick to him to provoke him to make him come out. "That I won't," said the keeper, "for if I anger him, the first he'll tear in pieces will be myself. Be satisfied, Sir Knight, with what you have done, which leaves nothing more to be said on the score of courage, and do not seek to tempt fortune a second time. The lion has the door open. He is free to come out or not to come out, but he has not come out so far, and he will not come out today. Your worship's great courage has been fully manifested already. No brave champion, so it strikes me, is bound to do more than challenge his enemy and wait for him on the field. If his adversary does not come, on him lies the disgrace, and he who waits for him carries off the crown of victory." "But that is true," said Don Quixote. "Close the door, my friend, and let me have, in the best form thou canst, what thou hast seen me do, be way of certificate, to wit, that thou didst open for the lion, that I waited for him, that he did not come out, that I still waited for him, and that he still did not come out, and lay down again. I am not bound to do more, enchantment savant, and God uphold the right, the truth, and true chivalry. Close the door as I bade thee, while I make signals to the fugitives that have left us." "What are you doing?" "Hi, can I help you?" "Hi." What are you doing? Alright, let me see here. The keeper obey. Well, I make signals to the fugitives that have left us, that they may learn this exploit from thy lips. The keeper obeyed, and Don Quixote, fixing on the point of his lance the cloth he had wiped his face with after the deluge of curds, proceeded to recall the others, who still continued to fly, looking back at every step. All in a body, the gentlemen bringing up the rear. Sancho, however, happening to observe the signaling of the white cloth, exclaimed, "May I die, if my master has not overcome the wild beast, for he is calling to us." They all stopped, and perceived that it was Don Quixote who was making signals, and shaking off their fears to some extent. They approached slowly until they were near enough to hear distinctly Don Quixote's voice calling to them. They returned at length to the cart, and as they came up, Don Quixote said to the carter, "Put your mules to once more, brother, and continue your journey. And do thou, Sancho, give him 2 gold crowns for himself and the keeper, to compensate for the delay they have incurred through me." "That I will give with all my heart," said Sancho. "But what became of the lions? Are they dead or alive?" The keeper then, in full detail, and bit by bit, described the end of the contest, exalting to the best of his power and ability the valor of Don Quixote, at the sight of whom the lion quailed, and would not and dared not come out of the cage, although he held the door open ever so long, and showing how, in consequence of his having represented to the knight that it was tempting God to provoke the lion in order to force him out, which he wished to have done, he very reluctantly, and altogether against his will, had allowed the door to be closed. "What dost thou think of this, Sancho?" "Excuse me, do you mind?" You know what, hold on. I'll just move it over there. I can at least read this here. "What dost thou think of this, Sancho?" said Don Quixote. "Are there any enchantments that can prevail against true valor? The enchanters may be able to rob me of good fortune, but of fortitude and courage they cannot." Sancho paid the crowns, the carter put to, the keeper kissed Don Quixote's hands for the bounty bestowed upon him, and promised to give an account of the valiant exploit to the king himself, as soon as he saw him at court. Then, said Don Quixote, if his majesty should happen to ask who performed it, you must say the Knight of the Lions, for it is my desire that into this the name I have hitherto borne, the Knight of the Rueful Countenance, be from this time forward changed, altered, transformed, and turned. And in this I follow the ancient usage of knights-errant, who changed their names when they pleased, or when it suited their purpose. The cart went its way, and Don Quixote, Sancho, and he of the green gaban went theirs. All this time Don Diego de Miranda had not spoken a word, being entirely taken up with observing and noting all that Don Quixote did and said, and the opinion he formed was that he was a man of brains gone mad, and a madman on the verge of rationality. The first part of his history had not yet reached him, for had he read it, with the amazement with which his words and deeds filled him would have vanished, as he would have understood the nature of his madness, but knowing nothing of it, he took him to be rational one moment and crazy the next. For what he said was sensible, elegant, and well expressed, and what he did absurd, rash, and foolish, and said he to himself, what could be madder than putting on a helmet full of curds, and then persuading oneself the enchanters are softening one's skull? Or what could be greater rashness and folly than wanting to fight lions tooth and nail? Don Quixote roused him from these reflections and this soliloquy by saying, no doubt, Señor Don Diego de Miranda, you set me down in your mind as a fool and a madman, and it would be no wonder if you did, for my deeds do not argue anything else. But for all that, I would have you take notice that I am neither so mad nor so foolish as I must have seemed to you. A gallant knight shows to advantage, bringing his lance to bear adroitly against upon a fierce bull under the eyes of his sovereign. In the midst of a spacious plaza, a knight shows to advantage arrayed in glittering armor, pacing the lists before the ladies in some joyous tournament. Yes. And all those knights show to advantage that entertain, divert, and, if we may say so, honor the courts of their princes by warlike exercises, or what resemble them, but to greater advantage that all these does a knight-errant show when he traverses deserts, solitudes, crossroads, forests, and mountains, in quest of perilous adventures, bent on bringing them to a happy and successful issue, all to win a glorious and lasting renown. To greater advantage, I maintain, does the knight-errant show bringing aid to some widow in some lonely waste, than the court knight dallying with some city damsel. All knights have their own special parts to play. Let the courtier devote himself to the ladies. Let him add luster to his sovereign's court by his liveries. Let him entertain poor gentlemen by the sumptuous fare of his table. Let him arrange joustings, martial tournaments, and prove himself noble, generous, and magnificent, and above all, a good Christian. And so doing, he will fulfill the duties that are especially his. But let the knight-errant explore the corners of the earth and penetrate the most intricate labyrinths. At each step let him attempt impossibilities. On desolate heaths let him endure the burning rays of the midsummer sun, and the bitter inclemency of the winter winds and frosts. Let no lion daunt him, let no monsters terrify him, no dragons make him quail, for to seek these, to attack those, and to vanquish all, are in truth his main duties. I, then, as it has fallen to my lot to be a member of knight-errantry, cannot avoid attempting all that to me seems to come within the sphere of my duties. Thusly, it was my bounden duty to attack those lions that I just now attacked, although I knew it to be the height of rashness, for I know well what valor is, that it is a virtue that occupies a place between two vicious extremes, cowardice and temerity, but it will be a lesser evil for him who is valiant to rise till he reaches the point of rashness than to sink until he reaches the point of cowardice. For as it is easier for the prodigal than for the miser to become generous, so it is easier for a rash man to prove truly valiant than for a coward to rise to true valor. And believe me, Señor Don Diego, in attempting adventures it is better to lose by a card too many than by a card too few. For to hear it said, such a knight is a rash and daring, sounds better than such a knight is timid and cowardly. I protest, Senor Don Quixote, said Don Diego. Everything you have said and done is proved correct by the test of reason itself, and I believe if the laws and ordinances of knight-errantry should be lost, they might be found in your worship's breast as in their own proper dispository and muniment house. But let us make haste and reach my village, where you shall take rest after your late exertions, for if they have not been of the body, then they have been of the spirit, and these sometimes tend to produce bodily fatigue. I take the invitation as a great favor and honor, Senor Don Diego, replied Don Quixote. And pressing forward to a better pace than before, at about 2 in the afternoon they reached the village and house of Don Diego, or as Don Quixote called him, the Knight of the Green Gaban. Or Gabon. I don't know. Yeah, this seems like quite a lengthy one. Either way, we managed to reach chapter 18. I've been yapping for about 3 odd hours. So I'm gonna, let me just, I gotta say, still good indeed. I think we're gonna be making good pace. I'll see if I can, I'm sure that we can finish Don Quixote by the end of the year. So long as we keep this pace. Maybe I have to pick it up a little, but maybe like 2 Don Quixote streams a week, we'll say. Still, quite a fun time. Let me see if there's anyone out and about. Let me just open up my stream manager. And let me see if there's anyone that we can go and raid. It looks like we've got a fellow PNG tuber by the name of Cinnamon Row 3. So I'll tell you what, let's go bounce you guys over that way, I suppose. And I will be seeing you on Friday. Also gonna go and watch the Yeek stream. Thank you again very much to one Braggy330. I do sincerely appreciate it, and I'll be sending you guys that away. So I hope everyone has a nice time, and I'll be seeing you on Friday. I don't know what we're going to be doing. Actually, you know what? I think I'm gonna do Splitterhead. Splitterhead. Whatever. Confronted things. Anyway, so long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, good night. And in case I don't see you, good morning and good afternoon. Or good evening as well. Anyway, goodbye.